Good morning from Sydney, and it's one of sport's oldest rivalries. It's England versus Australia, and this time, for the first time ever, it's in the semi-final of a Football World Cup.
Oh, England can go jump, basically, can't they? This is our home turf. This is the land of the Matildas. They deserve to win.
I can't doubt them. They're going to bring it home like they did the Euros.
Here in London, the latest inflation figures are being published right now. Economists expect lower energy costs to bring prices down. We'll get reaction from Treasury Minister John Glenn in just a few minutes. From ABC to AI, 2/3 of teachers say kids are using artificial intelligence to do their homework. Plus, check your charger or risk a catastrophic explosion. A warning to e-bike owners. Good morning. Just a few hours until the World Cup semi-final at Stadium Australia in Sydney. The Lionesses may roar, the Matildas may waltz, but we'll certainly be cheering them on. But first, we've got breaking news on the economy. The latest inflation figures are just out. I'm joined by our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan. Gurpreet, what can you tell us?
So we've had another big drop in inflation. It means that prices are still rising, but they're rising less quickly than they have been. So we've come in now at 6.8%. That's down from 7.9% in June. And it's down considerably from where we were at the end of last year when inflation was running at about 11%. So things are moving in the right direction. And 6.8%, it means that inflation is falling broadly in line with how the Bank of England expected it to do so. So we're still on course for halving inflation by the end of the year, but it's still more than 3 times the Bank of England's 2% target. There are worrying signs on core inflation, which is underlying price pressures in the economy. And that's running at 6.9%. It's proving sticky. And as we saw yesterday, wages in the economy are still rising robustly. So the Bank of England has still got some work to do. We can expect another interest rate rise in September.
OK, Gurpreet. So as Gurpreet was saying there, Tamara Cohen is here also. Tamara, higher than the Bank of England target, but also on target if the government wants to stick to its pledge, Rishi Sunak's pledge of halving inflation by the end of the year. It's still looking possible.
Yes, there'll be signs of relief in government today that it's gone down to 6.8%. Rishi Sunak spoke yesterday about light at the end of the tunnel on inflation, and they will hope that not only can he perhaps reach his target for the end of the year, but it will start to ease pressures on household finances. Treasury sources told me that this suggests the plan is working. The decisions made on public sector pay, for example, are working, but they say we are not complacent because inflation is still 4 times where it should be. And the concern about what we saw yesterday is that wages are now running ahead of inflation. And that, of course, sends blood pressures rising at the Bank of England and can mean that if interest rates go up, you will, for example, see people having their wages increase, but also their mortgage increase as well. We've got a lot of briefings from Labour and the Lib Dems today about how household bills are up on last year. People are paying more for energy, more for rail prices, although the government have announced today that rail prices, which typically go up by the inflation figure in July, will not be going up by that much next year. They will go up by less, but we don't know how much. So they're trying to ease the pressures on household finances, but prices are still going up, and a lot of people will still be feeling the squeeze for many, many months to come.
OK, Tamara, Gurpreet, thank you both very much for now. We'll be getting the government's reaction to this morning's figure in a short while. I'll be talking to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury, so stay with us for that. But in the meantime, let's hand over to Jackie. She's got the plum job. She's in Sydney this morning instead of being stuck on a sofa in London. Jackie, how's it all going?
Good morning to you, Jane, and hello if you're watching. Thanks for joining us. Yes, we are counting down to one of the first ever competitive matches between England and Australia. It is one of the biggest ever matches in the history of one of the world's oldest sporting rivalries, and it is the semi-final of this Women's World Cup. The Matildas against the Lionesses, and it's at fever pitch here in Australia. They are absolutely obsessed with this match, wall-to-wall coverage. Just to get a flavour of that, let's cross now to Rob Harris, our sports correspondent, and Nicole Johnson, who's out there amongst the fans. Let's cross to Rob first of all. And Rob, it was really interesting this morning at breakfast. We were looking at the papers, and the Daily Telegraph today is called the Daily Tillygraph because they call the Matildas the Tillies. And it's extraordinary how it's captured the imagination of this country, isn't it?
Yeah, huge anticipation, as if by magic. Here is that Daily Telegraph where they're focusing on the grudge rivalry, the smashes. Obviously, reference to the Ashes that was retained by Australia just a few weeks ago. Interestingly, the Daily Telegraph have irritated England a bit because they sent a helicopter over the closed training session yesterday, tried to discover some secrets from Sarina Wiegman. They haven't given them away in the paper, but they actually say who are England to question on morality. They're all stoking things up, referencing the Ashes, but they also do reference how Australia's heaviest ever football defeat came against the men's side in 1950, 17-0. But of course, the Matildas did beat England in April, the only defeat Sarina Wiegman has suffered in her 37 games as England manager. But it's all about the rivalry, the fans, and I've got some of them with me here outside the stadium. They're here really early. Let's bring you in. You're live on Sky News. Louise, you've been here a few weeks now. What's it been like travelling, following the team?
It's been amazing. Yeah, it's been really fun. Really enjoyed it so far. Yeah, hope it keeps going.
And what's impressed you about this side? You know, some of the wins haven't been sparkling, but they've won every game.
Yeah, we've dug deep each game, somehow managed to get the win even when we haven't really deserved it, like especially against like Nigeria. After Lauren James got sent off, we definitely didn't really deserve the win, but we've still dug deep and managed to get it. So, yeah. Let's
bring in some of the rivals, Ish and Cannon. Wow, what's this tournament been like for the Matildas? You can't imagine you'd be in a semi-final.
Absolutely. I think, you know, Australia is definitely getting around it now. Like, it's the place to be. It's the sport to be watching. Like, the world kind of paused when they went into pens in the last game, so I'm excited to see what tonight holds.
And is this the one you really want to win? Is it because it's England fierce?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, just to make the semi-final is amazing in itself, but we've got full belief in the girls, so we can do it.
You're going to be back here winning on Sunday?
Yes, definitely. You
know it.
But you think it's coming home?
I don't know. I'm so scared.
That's a bit of unease there. It's going to be a really tough atmosphere here. It's going to be raucous and intimidating.
Rob, thank you. Back to you in a little bit. Let's go to Nicole Johnson now. She's down on the beach. And Nicole, the confidence of this country that they're going to win this match is incredible.
It is very confident. People have a huge amount of faith in the Matildas. This team has managed to bring the entire country along with it throughout the tournament, and that momentum has just been building and building. There's a huge amount of love for the Matildas, especially for their captain, Sam Kerr, well known in England. She's the star striker for Chelsea, has a calf injury. People are waiting to see, will she be off the bench and leading this team? That's one of the big questions ahead of this game. But we've also found some fans wandering in a very relaxed fashion along Bondi Beach, not appearing to be too nervous about the game. So, Kerry, how are you feeling? I know that you're heading off to watch it tonight.
Yeah, we're pretty excited. We can't wait.
You've driven a long way to get here, though, just to give people in the UK a sense of how far you've come. When did you leave?
So we left on Sunday from Adelaide. It's about 1,500 kilometres from Adelaide to Sydney. We did a few little detours along the way, so probably about 5 to 6 hours driving a day.
It's a tough game ahead, though. You're up against the European champions. Do you really think the Matildas can do it?
I do. I think
Why?
they can. Because they've just got true grit, they've got heart, they've got fight, they have the skills and the experience, and they just seem to find it every time.
Let's see, a faith. I know that you're a big football fan and a football player. What is it that you love about this game?
Just getting out to watch, enjoying it. I love playing all the time, just going for kicks, and yeah.
And are you finding that with this football tournament, a lot more of your friends are getting interested in football and want to find out about it?
Yeah, it's a big thing for women's football. Some of my friends that don't even like soccer have been watching the games, enjoying it with their families. It's really good.
Who's your favourite Australian player?
I really like Ellie Carpenter. Very good player.
Well, enjoy the game tonight. So you can see just how extraordinary the support here is for the national team, of course. And in fact, more football jerseys have been sold for the Matildas than for the men's football team in this country. So that just goes to show the level of support that is growing here. The football stadiums have been packed. Tens of thousands of people, not only in Australia, but also in New Zealand as well. 1.7 million people have bought tickets, and this has turned out to be the most popular women's sporting event ever held.
Nicole, thank you. It has indeed, and the television figures have been absolutely huge. They expect this to be the most watched TV sporting event for 20 years in Australia. Now, all the talk across the networks this morning and yesterday and in the papers is of that lady. It's Sam Kerr. She's a superstar of the Australian team, and I am joined by Sandra Broby from The Sun. And Sandra, they all want to talk about Sam Kerr and her injury, but is she going to play? And if she does, is it a big problem for the Lionesses? Because she does seem to like scoring against Mary Earps.
I think the Lionesses should have more than enough to cope with Sam Kerr if she does indeed play and come and play a part like she did against France. And one factor that needs to be considered is that the Lionesses now have Millie Bright, who wasn't there in that game in April that Australia won. Someone who knows Sam Kerr very well, being, you know, her teammate at Chelsea, who trains with her week in, week out. That will make a big difference.
Now, at breakfast this morning, I do a big name drop here. I was talking to Ian Wright, and he said, oh, absolutely, I think the Lionesses are going to win this. And I tell you why, you know, they've just ground their way through a tournament. This is proper tournament football. It's not beautiful at times. That's how it is, and they know how to do it. Do you think that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, the number of clean sheets they've had, considering the injuries that they've had in, you know, coming into this tournament, plus the injury scare they had with Kira Walsh. I mean, to be able to come as far as they have with the likes of Leah Williamson not being there, no Beth Mead, no Fran Kirby, but they've got the depth and strength within the squad and the resilience to grind out the wins. And you're seeing another side to the Lionesses compared to what we saw last year, where they literally blitzed teams, and they just show that they've just got that grit and that determination to win. And it showed against Colombia, for example, who saw off Germany, who beat South Korea, and, you know, to see them off is no mean feat.
Yeah, and the fact they came from a goal down in that match as well, does that fill you with a bit of confidence that, you know, they've come through a penalty shootout, they've come from a goal down, they're definitely not playing their best, but somehow they're finding a way? And resilience is the word that Serena Wiegmann has used a lot this tournament.
Absolutely. I mean, and you've seen it from some of the senior players on the team, from the likes of Millie Bright talking about getting the job done, Lucy Bronze as well, talking about just seeing out these wins, even if they're not the prettiest, just to get the job done, to get them to where they need to be. And then another factor also is, you know, that they've got Lauren Hemp, you know, who should be starting this game, who came off early against Australia in April. Another, you know, threatening attacker for England, who was very good against Colombia. So, you know, they've got enough in there to be able to get the job done, as Millie Bright says, and to beat Australia.
As a British journalist, it's quite nerve-wracking, isn't it? But, you know, are you feeling confident? Are you feeling calm and confident?
Yes, I am. Yeah. You know, I mean, obviously, for the Lionesses will feel it, I guess, being on the pitch in, you know, a sold-out stadium, Australia, with all, you know, the Australia fans obviously cheering the Matildas on. But I am feeling confident. They've been here before. They've done it before. They've won the Euros. They've won a Women's Finalissima. They know they've got that, you know, we can win a tournament factor about them. So they should be able to get the job done, yeah.
Sandra, have a great day. Hopefully they will, fingers crossed. And I'm going to hark back to my lady in the accreditation centre who's Australian. She's the only one I found who said, I'm a bit nervous about this match. I think England have been very organised. And they have. Jayne.
Well, Jackie, excitement is mounting here in the studio, as our viewers may just have seen about that match. Thanks very much. Let's just give you a little bit of reaction to the latest inflation figures that we are getting. As we know, the CPI dropped to 6.8%, RPI just dropped to 9%. The Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt, says he's just released a statement saying the decisive action we've taken to tackle inflation is working, and the rate now stands at its lowest level since February last year. But while price rises are slowing, we are not at the finish line. We must stick to our plan to halve inflation this year and get it back to the 2% target as soon as possible. We're going to be talking to John Glenn, Chief Secretary to the Treasury, in the next few minutes. Meanwhile, police and the Crown Prosecution Service allegedly knew back in 2007 that another man's DNA was on the clothing of the woman Andrew Malkinson was wrongly imprisoned for raping. But he was left behind bars for another 13 years. Well, Sky's Sadia Chowdhury joins me now. And Sadia, we knew that this DNA had been found and that nothing had been done about it. But what's now been revealed is really the chain of communication surrounding that.
Yeah, when we saw Andrew Malkinson outside the Court of Appeal a few weeks ago, you may remember those pictures. He had just had his conviction quashed, and we were told by the judges in the Court of Appeal that that was because this new evidence had emerged, that DNA evidence linked the crime to another man. There are those pictures of Andrew Malkinson on the steps of the Court of Appeal, where he said he has always maintained his innocence. He was jailed for a further 10 years because he maintained his innocence, so a total of 17 years. Now, this is what the Guardian newspaper is reporting, that Andrew Malkinson's case files show that the CPS and police officers were aware of this DNA evidence in 2007. That's 3 years into his 17-year jail term, and that they opted to take no further action. And crucially, that they didn't inform the CCRC, that's the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Now, that's important because we know that Andrew Malkinson tried to go through them to get an appeal in 2012, and he was refused. They're the body that sort of look at safe or unsafe convictions, potentially unsafe convictions, and refer them to the Court of Appeal. The case files suggest, according to the Guardian newspaper, that the reason they didn't do that is because they were worried about costs. And Mr. Malkinson's lawyers say that instead of helping to overturn a wrongful conviction, the CCRC has acted as a barrier to justice. Now, of course, we've contacted the CCRC, the CPS and Greater Manchester Police for comment. The CPS have issued a statement to the Guardian newspaper. I'll read that out to you. It says, evidence of a new DNA profile found on the victim's clothing in 2007 was not ignored. It was disclosed to the defence team representing Mr. Malkinson for their consideration. And it adds, in addition, searches of the DNA databases were conducted to identify any other possible suspects. At that time, there were no matches and therefore no further investigation could be carried out. Well, Mr. Malkinson says he's still waiting for an apology, and he questions how many others may have been failed by the system.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, North Korea has claimed that a US soldier who was detained after crossing the border last month entered the country because of poor treatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. Well, our Asia correspondent Helen Smith joins me now from Beijing. Helen, just remind us a little bit about what happened with this man and what do we know about what we're now being told?
Yeah, this is the latest update in the remarkable story of Private Travis King. We found out just about a month ago that Private King had taken a tourist tour up to that border between North and South Korea. It's a pretty major tourist area. And then, according to eyewitnesses, he made this sudden and very concerted dash across the border from South Korea into North Korea and straight into the custody of North Korean officials. And it was a pretty shocking and intriguing story at the time. And since then, about a month ago, we've heard almost nothing from the North Koreans, and certainly many of Private King's family members saying how worried they've been. But that's come to an end today because North Korean state media has released a bit of information about Travis King. In that information, they essentially say that he chose to defect to North Korea because of, quote, inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. It says also that he was willing to seek refuge in the DPRK, which is North Korea, or a third country, and saying that he's disillusioned at unequal American society. Look, the American authorities, for their part, and the Pentagon saying that at the moment this is impossible to verify these statements, and they've said over multiple weeks that they've been trying every avenue to make contact and to establish Private King's whereabouts and well-being. It is worth saying that although we can't verify it, we do know that that Travis King was going through a relatively troubled period of his life. He'd just completed a jail term in South Korea where he'd been charged with assault. His family members had told US networks that he was struggling with the loss of a young family member, that he had faced racism of some form in the army. So it was obviously a difficult time for him. Worth saying, of course, everything from North Korea we should take with a major degree of caution because, of course, having a US soldier in their custody is a major propaganda opportunity for them.
Helen Ann, thank you very much. Helen Ann Smith there. Well, in the last few minutes, we have seen that inflation has fallen, the CPI dropping to 6.8%. Let's talk to Chief Secretary to the Treasury, John Glenn, who joins me now. Thanks very much for coming in. So the Prime Minister promised that we would get inflation down to half by the end of the year. Do you think this shows he can now do it?
Well, this is a very, very welcome news today. We're now down to 6.8%, well over 1% down. We're at the lowest level we have been since February last year. It wasn't going to be easy. None of the Prime Minister's pledges were going to be easy, but we are focused on taking all those decisions as a government to get us down to half what it was at the start of the year.
It's still, though, 6 times the Bank of England target of 2%, isn't it? When do you think we might reach that benchmark?
Well, the Bank of England themselves think that we're on course to get to 5% by the end of the year and then get to 3% by this time next year. And we're on course then to get to 2% target by 2025. But as I say, this isn't a sort of straight line process. You know, there are lots of factors that go into the inflation figures. And that's why the government, working very closely with the Bank of England, are very determined by the decisions we make around public spending, around pay settlements, around not allowing more expenditure to be made to keep focused on this target. Getting inflation down is the most important thing the government can do to lay the foundations for enduring and strong growth.
I mean, you say that there's work still to be done because, you know, as inflation falls, we're seeing wages going up and we're seeing, you know, interest rates go up. People are not actually feeling any better off yet, are they? People are still really, really struggling with the cost of living.
Well, as we saw with the wage data yesterday, it is higher. And what we've got to try and do is get to a point where we get rid of inflation and see high wage, high productivity economy and faster growth. The IMF are very positive about the growth for the UK economy when we get to the end of next year. We've seen stronger growth than many of our competitors and neighbours in Europe over the last 13 years. We had the strongest growth in the G7 last year. But this isn't easy when you have high inflation, and lots of economies have got high inflation. And as I say, it means that sometimes you've got to take tough decisions because you can't spend as much money, can't borrow as much, unlike the opposition who are very unclear about what they will borrow.
Do you think that the wage rises that we saw yesterday will lead to a more hefty rise in interest rates than we perhaps have seen?
Well, obviously, it's the Bank of England's decision on interest rates, and we're very clear that that must be their decision. They've got some tough decisions to make because obviously the data points move around quite a lot, and there's a lag in terms of the effect of the decisions they make. But we will work in lockstep with them, and they will make those decisions. I think their next decision is around the middle of September.
Let's just touch on rail prices because, of course, this particular set of figures are important because it's what the government uses to then determine next year's rail prices. You're not going to use RPI, which at 9% will be an enormous relief for commuters. What are you going to use?
Well, we have said that we will keep it below inflation. And obviously, I'll be working closely with Mark Harper, the Secretary of State, on what mechanism to use. But there are involving tough decisions there around, how to use his budget in a way that, it suits the commuters and suits the economy as a whole. Delicate, difficult decisions. We haven't come to the end of that discussion yet.
So below inflation, below the 9% RPI or below the 6.8%?
We'll make those announcements in due course. I'm not going to make them this morning.
You last year pegged it to wage growth, but of course that's at 7.8%, and that would be incredibly high.
Well, as I say, discussions are ongoing with Mark Harper. What we have said is that we won't be having a rate that's higher than inflation, but the details of that will be for him to announce in due course.
Why can't you freeze it? The Liberal Democrats are calling for it to be frozen this year, you know, saying that along with the cost of living, along with food prices, it's incredibly hard for families, it's incredibly hard for working families. Wouldn't freezing train prices this year help people?
Well, the thing is, when you're in opposition, you can say lots of things that are very attractive. When you're in government, you've got to take tough decisions within the envelopes of expenditure that we have. I think some of our political opponents, especially the Liberal Democrats, wanted us to subsidise mortgages a few months ago. Again, that was uncosted and wouldn't actually deal with the fact that we've got to have spending plans that add up. So, as I say, we are looking at what we can do on commuting costs, and that's something that the Secretary of State for Transport will make an announcement on in due course.
It's not just the opposition, though. It's campaigners, for transport campaigners are also pushing for a freeze on train fares. I mean, they've had...
I would expect them to be doing that. But as a government minister, what I've got to do is make sure that when we've set a budget for 3 years as Chief Secretary, that we hold to that budget. Because if we don't, we will have inflationary pressures. And we've seen today that inflation has fallen to a level now that it's its lowest since February last year. That doesn't happen by magic. It happens by deliberate action by government ministers holding on to government budgets, working very closely to take out inefficiencies and waste and ensure that we keep that pressure down on inflation. Getting inflation down is the most important thing for the British people, and that's what this government is committed to doing.
It is, of course, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 targets at the beginning of the year. He may well achieve it, but what about the other 4?
Well, as I said last week when I was doing the round on the GDP figures, you know, a lot's changed since the start of the year. At the start of the year, people were expecting a recession. We're not facing that now. We're not complacent at all. And when we get to the end of the year, we will then, and I'm sure he will want to report back on the 5 pledges that he's made at the centre of his strategy and aims for this year in government.
Apart of those 5 pledges, apart from stopping the boats, polls show that Keir Starmer is trusted to solve the other 4 problems more than the Prime Minister is. I mean, do you accept that the next government will be a Labour one?
No, I don't at all. What I accept is that the legacy of COVID, of the war in Ukraine, has given our economy some real shocks that take tough action to deal with, to get inflation down, to set those foundations for growth, to ensure that debt is falling. And we are working as a government in a very united, disciplined fashion to deliver on those 5 pledges. My job is not to worry about the opinion polls, but to do the right thing for the country, and that's what I'm doing week in, week out.
OK, final question before we go. It's been reported that Rishi Sunak attended a Taylor Swift concert on his holidays. Government sources won't confirm or deny, but they're not denying it. There have been lots of big acts touring this year. Have you had a chance to go to any concerts? And if not, which one would you have gone to?
No, I haven't been to any. I just went to watch my local football match, Salisbury. I'm glad they won 3-2 against Swindon Supermarines last night. That was the highlight of my summer activity so far.
And how do you think the Lionesses are going to do?
I think they do really well. I think the whole nation's going to get behind them, building on the Euro success last year. I think everyone's going to be watching at 11 o'clock this morning, and we look forward, I hope, to the final at the weekend.
John Glad, thanks very much for coming.
Thank you.
Right, let's get a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go.
To fly.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
There'll be more rain on Friday, but the next few days look mainly dry and warm. For now, it's mainly fine, if a little chilly in some rural spots, but there are some showers in the far north. And any early fog will soon lift to leave plenty of sunshine, although the morning but northern Scotland is going to be cloudier there.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to be back live in Sydney as England prepare to play Australia in the World Cup semi-final. And why e-bike riders are being urged to check their chargers for risk of fire.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that.
We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world.
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back to Sydney. We are counting down to the World Cup semi-final between England and Australia, the Lionesses and the Matildas, or the Tillies, as they quite often call them around these parts. Now, our sports correspondent Rob Harris and Sky's Nicole Johnson are here around this Olympic stadium as well. Let's go to Rob first of all. Looking forward to the game, Rob. I mean, it's a tense one, isn't it? Because it's a very tough one to call.
It is. While England should be considered favourites as the European champions, as the team that's reached 2 consecutive Women's World Cup semi-finals before this one, they've got the tournament pedigree. But Australia, in their first ever World Cup semi-final, are feeling that emotional wave of the nation. They've been carried by all the support in what's shaping up to be one of the biggest moments in Australian sporting history. They think back to here in the 2000 Sydney Olympics, Cathy Freeman's 400-metre gold. That's seen as one of the iconic moments. The Matildas are really matching up to that, bringing the nation together like never before in football. But they nearly didn't make it this far. They lost in the group stage to Nigeria. It was a real struggle. They had to beat the Olympic champions Canada. But since then, they've managed to find a way through, right the way through penalties in the quarterfinals, the longest ever penalty shootout to beat France. So while England might think they've had it tough, well, it's been a struggle for Australia too. But England will hope to find that fluidity once again, that form that they saw against China, the 6-1, but they have had to cope without Lauren James, the top scorer now, for another game because she's been suspended following a red card. Will Sarina Wiegman stick with 3 at the back? All these big tactical decisions for her to take in what is shaping up to be one of the biggest moments for England too, as they try to reach a first World Cup final since the men in '66.
Rob, thank you. Let's cross over to Nicole now. Nicole, I was having a little chat to Arsène Wenger this morning, a very famous English football manager who's actually French. But he said it is incredible how this World Cup has just flowed and captured the imagination of this nation. And he said, that's it now. It will be huge in this country.
Well, that's what everyone is saying. It took a little while for that momentum to build, but when it started to really build, then the whole country got behind the Matildas. And you can see behind me, even here at Bondi Beach, they have made this wonderful mural in honour of the Matildas. That's Sam Kerr, the Australian captain, star striker for Chelsea right there. Many of the questions about how Australia will perform have centred on Sam Kerr. She's been off with a calf injury, unable to play for most of the games except for the last one. So Australians will be waiting in that stadium tonight to see whether she gets off the bench. And we know that England will be keeping a close eye on her because she can really change the entire pace of the game, and we saw that during the last one. But the growth of the sport here has been phenomenal. We were just Football Australia, they said that they don't have enough coaches, they don't have enough facilities for the number of children and for the number of women who are now coming out and saying that they want to play football. So there has been a real sort of sweep of this sort of Matilda's fever across the entire country.
It is indeed Matilda's mayhem, they're calling it. I am joined now by Erin and Patrick, a father and daughter duo with a love for the Matildas. And I'm pretty excited because Patrick is a £10 pom. Guys, I am loving your colours. They are fantastic. But Patrick, where is your scarf?
I can't buy it anywhere. It's all sold out.
I actually crossed a sports shop today, and it was like they were giving them away for free. It was chaos in there.
Oh, it's been absolutely unbelievable. It's just been the best ride. Everyone in Australia is behind it. Everyone's behind the Tillies. I just think it's going to be a great game.
And what do you think the result is going to be? Because what struck me is the huge confidence that the whole of Australia has that you're just going to win it easily.
I think your team's been playing good. I think Toon's been playing good. I think Stanaway's been playing good. Russo up the front's been good, but I just think Caitlin Ford's been better. I mean, Mary Earp in goal, but I read some statistics today. In the last 8 times that Mary Earp has seen Sam Kerr, 8 games, so Sam Kerr scored 8 goals. So I think if Kerr and Ford played well, then I think we may just get on top of it. I think hopefully the crowd gets involved. We score early and
And our coach has got it 2 games over the English coach.
Yeah, we're the only ones that have beaten you.
You keep going on about that match back in April in Brentford, but there was lots of things going on there. And Pat, how much are you looking forward to this match? And what do you think about the England team? Because you are actually English. Surely you've got to have a little bit of allegiance there, no?
Well, I've got it here for both teams, but I came out here when I was 8 years old, and I've been here ever since. So I've got to go for the Matildas.
Are you worried about Sam Kerr? Because she has been injured at this World Cup. She got injured on the eve of it.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking about the fact she had her leg bandaged yesterday. Will she even play in this match?
I think the rest of the team has stepped up. We've won so many games without her. I think if she's coming off the bench, she's just going to be that X-factor player. So I hope she comes on, and just the raw when she comes on, Australia's behind her. So hopefully she comes on, plays well, and we advance to our first grand final.
It's a team of champions, and a champion team.
A champion team.
To get us where we are now.
We're going to get the trifecta. We've got the Ashes. What else we got? Netball World Cup. So
I wondered how long it would take for you to bring that up. Listen, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and have a fantastic evening.
Go Matildas!
Yeah, but not too fantastic. Jayne, back to you.
Jackie, thanks very much. Lots more from Jackie throughout the programme. Well, let's get more reaction here now to today's inflation figures. Let's talk now to Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Good to talk to you this morning, Ed. Are you relieved about inflation figures? The CPI fallen to 6.8%?
Well, it's positive news that prices aren't rising quite so fast, but they're still rising fast. They're rising faster in our country than they are in many other countries. And faster than they have for many, many years. And families and pensioners, when they go and do their shopping, when they get their energy bills, when they get their mortgages, their rents, they're still seeing those going up by huge amounts. And Liberal Democrats are particularly worried today because this these month's inflation figures will be used to calculate railway fares for the next year. And so that's why we're calling for freezing energy fares, rail fares next year as some way of helping people who are really, really struggling.
We spoke to the Chief Secretary to the Treasury a short while ago. He's promised that they are being linked to inflation, but they aren't going to be. They're going to be low inflation, and that's a figure that he says is yet to be determined. But he says, you know, those in opposition may well call for freezes for things like rail fares, but they haven't got to balance the books.
Well, we've always put forward a costs of manifesto at election time, so we do balance the books. I'm afraid it's the Conservatives who've been very reckless with government funding, and that's why the country's in such a mess under the Conservatives. I mean, you know, I listen to government ministers, and they just seem so out of touch with the reality that most families and pensioners are facing. And when we talk about these sorts of figures, they seem quite complacent. They seem to give themselves a pat on the back when, you know, families are really struggling out there. And, you know, I just wanted a government that seems to care a bit more, and this lot just don't.
Well, the government would point out that in terms of a rail freeze, price freeze, you know, we're at a time now when workers are demanding more pay than ever. Rail revenues are down by a third compared to before the pandemic. You know, they would say, yes, it would be lovely to give it, you know, to give everybody a break, but we have to also live in the real world.
Well, the real world is the economy is struggling, and we need to get people back to work. And one of the things that you would do if you took up the Liberal Democrat idea is you'd boost the economy. You would get more people using our public transport, which we know is important for our economy, for the environment. And so you have many benefits. And that's why I just think the government is so out of touch. They don't seem to get the combination of all these price rises, energy bills, mortgages, rents, railway fares. The combination is hitting people. You know, we've calculated that a commuter family is going to be clobbered by over £300 extra every month due to the combination of mortgages, food, and rail fares. This is a huge amount. And, you know, when I hear government ministers trying to say, well, you know, they can't do anything, well, they could do something. The fact that they don't backs up my argument. They just seem out of touch and don't care.
It's been suggested by some that the energy price cap has been fueling inflation and also reducing competition. Should that be rethought?
Well, I'm worried about the energy bills going into this winter. There's a real concern that actually, rather than continue to go down, they're going to go up again. And, you know, we think there should be more competition, but we definitely think there should be targeted help for those people who are struggling, whether through what's called warm home discount or the winter fuel allowance. We need to make sure people are not going to be hit this winter and end up being cold, as well as not being able to afford their bills. So I'd like to see from the government them getting it in advance of things. I mean, Liberal Democrats have led the argument on the windfall tax on the oil and gas companies to provide the money so we can afford to help people and businesses. And the government have been so weak on things like that. You know, Liberal Democrats have led the argument for providing things like an energy cap freeze to help people. And, you know, it's those sorts of arguments that I think really resonate with people, and they look at the government and can't quite believe that they're just not taking action.
You've also called for a targeted mortgage relief scheme, but there are concerns from some economists that this would fuel inflation further. We've seen today in the Financial Times, some of the banks are reducing their fixed-term mortgage rates, some for a fourth week in a row. Isn't the mortgage market starting to correct itself?
Well, after the Liz Truss budget, you'll remember, it sent mortgages rates sky high and caused a lot of the turmoil that we've seen ever since for mortgage holders, for pensioners. And it's those that crashing the economy under Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak that have caused all these problems. And what Liberal Democrats are saying is that those people who are likely to have their homes repossessed and be homeless, that is the moment to provide help with our mortgage support fund. And, you know, our fund is built on previous ideas that actually used to happen. There used to be support for families facing repossession. Our scheme is based on good practice from the past. And the fact that the Conservatives are turning a blind eye to this and aren't prepared to act, again, backs our overall view that they're just out of touch. They just don't seem to want to help people.
OK, Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Also in the news this morning, take a look at this. E-bike and e-scooter owners are being urged to check their chargers to avoid a fire. This video by the charity Electrical Safety First simulates a battery being overcharged before bursting into flames. Its survey of 1,000 e-bike and e-scooter users in the UK found almost half were using chargers incompatible with their devices. A plume of black smoke was seen billowing from a wind turbine off the Norfolk coast. The company that owns Scroby Sands wind farm says no one was on board when the turbine fire broke out. Police have issued an urgent warning to cat owners even in the Swindon area after 4 animals died after being poisoned in recent days. Wiltshire Police has opened a joint investigation with the RSPCA and warned cat owners in the Emerald Crescent area of Blunsdon St Andrew to keep a close eye on their pets. Maybe keep them indoors. Now, with the year's A-level results to be released tomorrow, Sky News has taken a look at the effects that artificial intelligence is having on education. 2/3 of teachers say that they believe students regularly hand in work written by AI and are calling for help to catch those cheating the system. Sky's Becky Johnson reports.
This is my Seneca learning. Currently,
Exam grades are expected to return to normal this year for the first time since the pandemic. But something else has been spreading into classrooms that isn't going away.
So I would particularly like to use it for my English work.
AI, artificial intelligence tools are increasingly being used by pupils who've gone online for help with their work.
I use it a lot for online homework, revision tools, so if I need any additional support, maybe I don't want to ask my teacher or it's something that she can't give me, it is available like whenever I need it on like AI programmes.
I would say a large proportion of school children do use AI, especially for homework.
This is the type of thing students can use AI for.
It can write essays within a matter of seconds and save teachers time with lesson planning. There are benefits, but obvious concerns.
There definitely needs to be government regulation, especially from a safeguarding point of view. What is appropriate use in the classroom? How can they learn from it? How can they get better understanding of concepts? But actually, what is cheating and what is good practice?
And is there concern that pupils are using it to cheat?
There is concern, absolutely, because teachers haven't been equipped with what they need in terms of pulling together the understanding. So they need that support so that they can spot it.
66% of teachers believe they're regularly receiving work written by AI. More than half want better training in it, and 31% want the government to introduce regulation to police its use. A government spokesperson told us artificial intelligence has the potential to transform education, and they've launched an online consultation on the benefits and risks. How to make the best use of rapidly advancing technology is a question for school leaders and politicians. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Coming up after the break, we'll have more reaction to that breaking news on inflation. Plus, how well does your horse know you? Better than you might think, apparently, should you have one.
We were just finishing a meal and our army boy ran up the steps and he said, "You've got half an hour. Grab what you can and I'll be back in half an hour." And that was our beginning of leaving, because we had to get over the bridge before they blew it up. We were we were staying with Uncle Tom, and everybody, of course, was making to the harbour. And Mum said, yes, all right, then we'll go. So off we went, right through all the bombed area and all the dead bodies and heads stuck on bridges and all sorts of things. When we got there and we got into the head of the queue again, they refused to allow us to go on the ship because we were not government people. My father was employed from Singapore. He wasn't employed from London.
But then you ended up in the notorious Changi prisoner of war camp as a little girl.
Yes.
How was that?
Really, in a sense, excited. You know, we were all children, and meeting new friends because all of them were, you know, more or less the same age, and with my brother, he always seemed to gather people. He was such a friendly person, so it was all running around. Oh, we've got this room, or you know, things like that. So it was all started beautifully in that sense, but and then it you know, came down and down. Yes.
How did you cope with being exposed to such horror at a young age?
I don't know. It's just one of these things you do. You know, it's there. You've got no choice. You do it. It's the same like going to a new school. You just followed, you know, what you were told to do, and that was it. Another thing too, in that sort of situation, we had to get to know the guards. They couldn't speak English, and we didn't speak Japanese, and so it was all, you know, hand in, you know, gestures, you know, what they wanted us to do.
Let's get more now on the latest inflation figures which have been released in the last hour. Let's talk now to the Professor of Economics at King's College London and, of course, former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office, Jonathan Portes. Good to talk to you today. So the Prime Minister and Chancellor look to be on to reach their target of halving inflation by the end of the year. How relieved are you, perhaps, would be the word, at today's inflation figures?
Well, overall, they're more or less as expected. I think I would make 2 points. First of all, that the services inflation, as opposed to goods, so things like food and energy and so on, have, as we expected, the impact of those on inflation has been coming down, and that's led to the drop on the headline figure. But the core inflation, the things, inflation taking those things out of the calculation, and in particular inflation for services, so things like car insurance, travel, and so on, has actually gone up a bit. And I think that means that, if anything, the Bank of England will be slightly disappointed with these figures, and that makes an interest rate rise at the next meeting slightly more likely. And you can see that already in the markets because the pound is going up, suggesting that markets expect that interest rate rises are still likely. So overall, pretty much as expected, but perhaps slightly worse. The second point I would make, and this is the important one, is about the distributional impact. What these figures also show is that inflation continues to hit the poorest households hardest. They've seen inflation up by perhaps 3% more than the richest households over the last couple of years. So people at the bottom end are getting squeezed. And you also saw that in the pay figures yesterday, where people at the upper end of the income distribution, working in finance and so on, are getting higher pay rises than people at the bottom end of the earnings distribution. So what's happening is we're redistributing money from the relatively poor people to the rich. And that's not something the Bank of England can address through interest rate raises. The government has to do something about that by providing more support to people at the bottom.
I mean, Rishi Sunak wouldn't want to be seen as a reverse Robin Hood, would he? I mean, do you think that the government policies are what has led to this fall? But when you look at the broader picture, you know, how are they doing the right thing?
No, I mean, I think, as I said, yes, these clearly, of course, it's the result of government policies. It's the result of successive cuts to the benefit system, not just under Rishi Sunak, but over the last 10 years or so. And we can see that in rising rates of poverty and deprivation, homelessness, and so on, and in particular around housing costs, where the very large cuts in housing benefit, combined with the failure, of course, to build enough houses, are one of the factors beyond both homelessness and the increased burden on people trying to find somewhere to live, particularly in the private rented sector. So we have this slightly odd position where the government is trying to claim credit for the overall fall in inflation, which of course has very little to do with the government and is everything to do with global forces in the Bank of England, just as the rise was. But it's not doing anything about the things it actually can control, which is who feels the impact of rising prices and wages.
Jonathan Portes, former Chief Economist at the Cabinet Office, thank you.
Thank you.
Let's get a look at the weather now.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
More rain is coming for Friday, but the next few days look mainly dry and warm. For now, it's mainly fine, if a little chilly in some rural spots, but there are some showers in the far north. An early fog will lift to leave plenty of sunshine through the morning, but northern Scotland will be cloudier. It'll stay mainly dry, but there'll be a few light showers around, with almost anywhere at risk. Calm conditions mean it'll feel quite warm in the sunshine. The afternoon will see showers becoming mainly confined to the north and west.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, some breaking horse news. Why the long face? Yeah, you'll be surprised to hear that it's a question horses might be asking you. Apparently, your horse can differentiate between expressions of joy and sadness. Should you have a horse, of course. Researchers in Finland and France have been observing and analysing horses' behaviour, and they were shown human facial expressions and were able to tell the difference.
Good morning from Sydney and one of sport's oldest rivalries. It's England versus Australia, and this time, for the first time ever, it's in the semi-final of the Football World Cup. Yes, it's the Lionesses. They are ready and plan to take the game to the Matildas before a sellout crowd of 75,000 Australians.
I think we're going to win. We're going to make the Poms work hard.
Here in London, a fall in inflation. Falling energy prices help bring down inflation to 6.8%, but economists predict more interest rate rises are still likely. From ABC to AI, 2/3 of teachers say kids are using artificial intelligence to do their homework. Plus, check your charger or risk a catastrophic explosion. The warning to e-bike owners. Good morning. Not long to go now, just a few hours until the World Cup semi-final at Stadium Australia in Sydney. The Lionesses will roar, the Matildas will waltz. We'll be cheering them on. Back to Jackie there in a short while. But first, breaking news in the UK this morning. Inflation fell to 6.8% in July, down from the previous month. Well, the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has said in the last few minutes that it shows that the government's actions are working, but economists predict more interest rate rises are still likely. Well, I'm joined by our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, and our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. And Gurpreet, to you first of all, so they have come down, but analysts that we've spoken to have pointed out that because wages are still going up, because the cost of food is still going up so enormously, people aren't feeling the benefit of it in their pockets.
Yeah, so we've had another big drop in inflation, and it means that prices are still rising. They're just rising less quickly than they once were. And as you said, that's largely because of a big drop in energy prices. Ofgem has lowered the energy price cap. Food price inflation has also come down, but food prices are still rising at a staggering pace of around 14% a year. So it's important to caveat that. But that being said, the inflation rate is now down to 6.8%. That's down from 7.9% in June and considerably lower than where we were towards the end of last year when the inflation rate was running at about 11%. So things are moving in the right direction. And that figure of 6.8%, it's broadly in line with the Bank of England's own forecasts. So that means, well, it suggests that we're still in line to halve inflation by the end of the year. However, 6.8%, it's still more than 3 times the Bank of England's 2% target. The battle is far from over. And core inflation, so that's a measure of underlying price pressures in the economy, that's still really sticky at 6.9%. The bank will want to get that down. It's also got an eye on wages in the economy. We had figures out yesterday which showed that wages are still rising at a robust pace. So all of this suggests that the Bank of England will most probably have to raise interest rates again in September.
Yeah. And Tamara, our political correspondent, Tamara, Rishi Sunak's pledge to halve it by the end of the year looks to be on track. But, you know, as has been pointed out, life for the poorest in the UK doesn't feel like it's getting better.
That's right. There will be relief in government that on the narrow aim of meeting Rishi Sunak's target, halving inflation to around 5% by the end of the year. They feel that things are on track. Jeremy Hunt talked about the plan working. Many of the factors here are completely beyond the government's control. I mean, energy prices have done a lot of the work today, and certainly issues like food prices being stubbornly high. A lot of that the government can't do very much about. But they may end up in a situation where, although inflation is down to around the levels it was 15 months ago, so it is a big drop, if interest rates go up at the next meeting in September, which is considered much more likely now, and again, we're now looking at you maybe earn more because wages are now running above inflation, but then you're paying more on your mortgage as well, and everything is still relatively expensive, so people don't actually feel better off. And that's why we've got the political reaction today from Labour and the Liberal Democrats has been to show that annual bills are going up a lot, whether it's rail fares or energy or food, it's all going up a lot. Typically, the rail fares increase in January is based on the July inflation figure, and so the government have moved quite quickly to say that it won't be a huge rise in January based on this inflation figure, but they haven't said exactly what it will be, and they also said it won't happen until March to give people a bit of relief there. But still, we are looking at people feeling the squeeze for many months to come, and even if Rishi Sunak does meet this target, we are still around 4 times where inflation should be.
OK, Tamara and Gurpreet, thank you both very much. Well, let's take you back to Sydney. Jackie Beltrao is down there, just in advance of the semi-final. Lots and lots of fans arriving where you are, Jackie. What does it feel like? What's the atmosphere like?
Yep, it's really building now, Jane. It's getting a lot busier, it's getting a lot louder, it's got a lot colder, like a sort of crisp autumn night in Manchester instead of a lovely sort of summer night in Sydney, which is what I was expecting. How wrong was I? But I think that will suit the Lionesses, really. And we are now counting down to the first ever competitive match between England and Australia. And it is one of the biggest ever matches in the history of one of the world's oldest sporting rivalries, the World Cup semi-final here at the Olympic Stadium in Sydney. Well, our sports correspondent Rob Harris and Sky's Nicole Johnson are also both here in Sydney. And let's go to Rob first of all. And Rob, what do you think the girls will be doing now, the Lionesses? And they won't want to be looking out at all this lot, because I honestly have not spotted a single England supporter.
No, it is absolutely covered with Australia fans here, but it's going to be a really intimidating atmosphere for the Lionesses, but they are hoping the pressure will get to them. Something the England team might have just been reading is the shortlist for the Players' Player of the Year that has just landed. There's one Lioness among the 6, Rachel Daly, who scored 22 goals for Aston Villa last season. She's one of the attacking threats. The only Matilda on the side is Chelsea's Sam Kerr, who helped to lead them to the double. So, bit of news there. That's just broken the Professional Footballers Association. But, of course, they're all trying to do it for their countries, for England in particular. It's their 3rd consecutive World Cup semi-final. Can they take the next step, or will the Matildas in their first World Cup semi-final stop them? Who better to ask? Perhaps than some fans who are all part of this big match build-up atmosphere. Well, this is a lot of pressure, isn't it, on the Matildas to deliver now you've got this far?
There's a bit of pressure, but I think they'll perform well. So far, so good.
How much is it a grudge rivalry against England? Is there a bit of extra edge?
Of course, it's always in the Ashes or any other sport, so hopefully we get an extra edge on the soccer too.
Let's move from Carlo to Sinead. Does beating Australia carry that extra little thing for you?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Matildas, they are amazing, but Lionesses have got that edge. We'll show that tonight.
What about this side? It's not been sparkling at times. It's been quite tough, hasn't it, some of these games?
Yeah, but they showed their resilience. They've pushed through, and I think that we are going to bring it home.
You've got the confidence?
I've got confidence, of course. I've got confidence.
And what about you? Do you think the Matildas have, can they win the World Cup? They've never done it in football.
Of course we can. We've got the best women's player in the world, so of course we can. There's no doubt about it.
Excellent. Well, enjoy the game, and there's going to be more than 70,000 Australia fans. Can they do it, England? And Serena Wiegmann, as European champions, will be hoping they can add another major trophy.
Rob, for now, thanks very much indeed. Let's pop over and speak to Nicole. And, Nicole, there are so many Aussie fans arriving here in the green and gold. That stadium is going to be a cauldron. And what do the fans think about how their team are going to deal with that pressure tonight?
Well, as we just heard, they're maintaining their confidence. There's a huge amount of love in Australia for the Matildas, and that has been building and building throughout this tournament. As the tournament's progressed, so has the popularity of the Matildas. So much so that I am down here at Bondi Beach, and you can see this sort of huge mural behind me of the Matildas just unveiled this week. We have Sam Kerr, the Australian captain, there in the corner. Very well known in England. She's a star striker for Chelsea. And one of the real issues for the Australians has been Sam Kerr has been out with a calf injury, unable to play almost all of the games. So all of those Australian fans will be watching tonight to see, does Sam Kerr get off the bench and lead the team out? She's really considered to be perhaps the strongest player to lead the team. Also, the growth of the sport here just in the last few weeks has been phenomenal to watch. Speaking to Football Australia, they have said that they don't have the facilities or the coaches to handle the level of demand that they're now seeing from children and from women who want to play football. So all of this probably would have been unthinkable in a country like Australia only a few years ago, which traditionally isn't a football country. But right now, all of their eyes are on this game tonight. It's said to be the game that will stop the nation. Of course, they want to beat England at its own game, and then go on into the finals and win the World Cup.
Nicole, thank you. I'm joined now by footballer and football pundit Courtney Sweetman-Kirk. And Courtney, we're just talking there about the fans and the pressure, and there's going to be 75,000, maybe more Australians in there just baying for an Australian victory. Knowing what you know of those girls, the Lionesses, how will they deal with that? Because normally everyone's shouting for them.
Yeah, I've spoken to them. To be honest, they're excited. I think the Colombia game, it felt like an away game. There was lots of Colombians in the stadium. So I think that was a real good warm-up. I spoke to Sarina Wiegman as well, the England manager, about that, and she said that was probably the perfect warm-up for this game. So look, no doubt it's going to be hostile against the Lionesses, but I think they'll thrive on it. They love that competitive environment.
Now, every Australian I've spoken to brings up the defeat at the Brentford Stadium back in April, 2-0. Sam Kerr scored again against Mary Earps. She seems to always do that. How much will the girls have looked at maybe that match and see what went wrong, what went right? I mean, or was it a friendly and it's just something that done and dusted, move on?
Oh, look, I think there's something to take from it, but we've got to remember, like you say, it was a friendly, it was a different situation. Sarina Wiegman at that point was changing the England team around to try and find a formula for the World Cup. They also did a lot of analysis now in terms of with Australia at this tournament. Obviously, they've been without Sam Kerr for most of this tournament, so they've done a lot of analysis about Australia now. I think they would have obviously taken the negatives out of that and tried to rectify the game from April, but I think that was a long way away.
Sam Kerr is the undoubted star of the Australian team. She is the one who was the standout player before anybody else, but she's been injured, as you pointed out. She's only played really a little bit of football in this World Cup. Does it make much difference to the England team if she starts or not?
Look, I think they will have prepared both ways. For me, Steph Catley and Caitlin Ford have had a fantastic tournament down that left-hand side, so if Sam Kerr doesn't start, they are definitely the ones to watch. Look, she's a fantastic impact player to bring on as well. But as I say, I was speaking to Sarina Wiegman in the press conference, and they've prepared either way for that. So whether she starts or whether she doesn't, England will have a plan.
What do you think? How do you think this is going to end?
I'll be honest, I'm really confident. It's the most confident I've been throughout the tournament. The Colombia game, Nigeria, I was so nervous before, but today I feel confident. I think we've got the Matilda's number, and I think we're going to reach a World Cup final.
Exciting, bold predictions. Courtney, thanks very much indeed for joining us. It's getting quite busy here. About 3 hours or so to go till kick-off, and honestly, I've not seen a white shirt. It is green and gold all the way, and that is why the Lionesses think all the pressure will be on the Matildas tonight.
OK, Jackie, I'm getting lots of grief here. You probably can't see me, but I'm wearing yellow. Can I point out it's yellow, not gold, to everybody watching? This isn't some kind of subliminal message. But thanks very much, Jackie. We'll be back to you a little later in the programme. Now, police and the Crown Prosecution Service allegedly knew in 2007 that another man's DNA was on the clothes of the woman that Andrew Malkinson was wrongly imprisoned for raping. But, as we know, he was left behind bars for another 13 years. Sky's Sadia Chowdhury joins me now. Sadia, we knew that this DNA existed, but why did the authorities not make it known between themselves?
Well, it seems to be a real big mess now. We thought this was a great miscarriage of justice in the first place, and now we're getting these new details emerging. And every time we see anything more of this case, it just seems like it's just been such a big mess, this whole thing. So we've if we go back a few weeks ago to the Court of Appeal when Andrew Malkinson's conviction was quashed, the judges said that his conviction was unsafe because of this new DNA evidence that had emerged linking the crime to a different person. Now, it seems that that evidence isn't actually that new. This is according to the Guardian newspaper, which has looked through Andrew Malkinson's case files, and they say that the CPS and Greater Manchester Police had that evidence in 2007. That would have been just 3 years into what eventually was a 17-year jail sentence for Andrew Malkinson. Now, the case files suggest apparently that none of that information was passed on to the CCRC, that's the Criminal Cases Review Commission. Now, that's really important because the CPS has to, as early as possible, pass that information on to the CCRC because it is the CCRC's job to look at any potential unsafe convictions and refer them to the Court of Appeal. And we know that in 2012, when Andrew Malkinson went to the CCRC to get an appeal, they refused him. We're being told now that that was because they were concerned about the costs involved in new forensics testing. And Andrew Malkinson's lawyers are saying that instead of trying to help him overturn a wrongful conviction, that the CCRC acted as a barrier to justice. Now, of course, we've contacted the CCRC, the CPS and Greater Manchester Police for comment. We haven't heard back from them, but the CPS did tell The Guardian, and I've got a statement here, they've said, evidence of a new DNA profile found on the victim's clothing in 2007 was not ignored. It was disclosed to the defence team representing Mr Malkinson for their consideration. In addition, searches of the DNA databases were conducted to identify any other possible suspects. At that time, there were no matches and therefore no further investigation could be carried out. Mr Malkinson says he's still waiting for an apology from the CPS and he questions how many others have been failed by the system.
OK, Sadia, thanks so much. Now, with this year's A-level results to be released tomorrow, Sky News has taken a look at the effects artificial intelligence is having on education. 2/3 of teachers say they believe students regularly hand in work written by AI and are calling for help to catch those cheating the system. Sky's Becky Johnson reports.
This is my Seneca learning. Currently,
Exam grades are expected to return to normal this year for the first time since the pandemic. But something else has been spreading into classrooms that isn't going away.
So I would particularly like to use it for my English work.
AI, artificial intelligence tools are increasingly being used by pupils who've gone online for help with their work.
I use it a lot for online homework, revision tools, so if I need any additional support, maybe I don't want to ask my teacher or it's something that she can't give me, it is available like whenever I need it on like AI programmes.
I would say a large proportion of school children do use AI, especially for homework.
This is the type of thing students can use AI for.
It can write essays within a matter of seconds and save teachers time with lesson planning. There are benefits, but obvious concerns.
There definitely needs to be government regulation, especially from a safeguarding point of view. What is appropriate use in the classroom? How can they learn from it? How can they get better understanding of concepts? But actually, what is cheating and what is good practice?
And is there concern that pupils are using it to cheat?
There is concern, absolutely, because teachers haven't been equipped with what they need in terms of pulling together the understanding. So they need that support so that they can spot it.
66% of teachers believe they're regularly receiving work written by AI. More than half want better training in it, and 31% want the government to introduce regulation to police its use. A government spokesperson told us artificial intelligence has the potential to transform education, and they've launched an online consultation on the benefits and risks. How to make the best use of rapidly advancing technology is a question for school leaders and politicians. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Now, let's get more on the latest inflation figures. I'm joined now from the Labour Party. The Deputy Labour leader, Angela Rayner, joins me now. Good to talk to you this morning, Angela. The fact that inflation has fallen down now to 6.8%, the CPI, is this a vindication of Rishi Sunak's economic policies?
Well, of course, we've seen with the disastrous budget that the Conservatives put forward that crashed the economy. We've seen that the UK have had the highest prices and the cost of living has significantly bitten for people. And this inflationary figures today just shows that prices are still going up, but they are not going up at the steeper rate that they were. That is no means for celebration because we still have a low wage, low growth, high tax economy at the moment and no plan really in the long term to get us out of that. Whereas, you know, I'm in Newcastle and in the northeast today to talk about Labour's Green Prosperity Plan, which is about the long-term investment for our national security, for our energy needs, but also about those jobs for the future and growing our economy, which is so desperately needed at the moment.
We'll come on to more of that in a moment, but on the topic of inflation, we're seeing more than a dozen banks and building societies are cutting rates on their fixed mortgages this week. Doesn't this show that actually slowly the economy is starting to correct?
Well, it shows that we're not in the position that we were in when Liz Truss crashed the economy, but it shows that we're still in a very weak position when we look at ourselves internationally. And as I say, the Conservatives still haven't got a plan on how we, you know, tackle the low wage, the low growth and the high tax economy that they've left us with after 13 years of being in power. So whilst the inflationary rate isn't going up in the steep curve that it was, people are still going to see prices rise and people are still going to struggle. And of course, these are bills that families can't get away from. Your mortgage, your rent, your energy prices, your food prices are all costs that you can't, you know, offset, that you can't get away with not paying. So it is having an impact on people's cost of living at the moment.
Well, back to clean energy. This plan to make Britain a clean energy superpower, how are you going to do it?
Well, our Green Prosperity Plan is about, you know, helping the businesses that want to invest in the long-term future of our energy needs to invest in the new technologies around offshore and onshore wind, which the government have failed to meet their own targets on. It's around hydrogen, it's around carbon capture, and it's around doing the right thing to be a global player internationally on making sure that the industries are here in Britain, but also about creating those jobs for the future and tackling the climate emergency. We have a plan to be the green energy superpower by 2030, which independent figures show that we would create 65,000 new good jobs. So our long-term plan is one of energy security in the UK, bringing down bills, but also giving good jobs across the whole of the United Kingdom.
Can I ask you, while we have you here, about a case which I'm sure you're aware of, and we've just been covering it here on Sky, Andrew Malkinson, and this is the man that was accused of rape. He was jailed for 17 years. It was known that there was DNA evidence quite early on, but it now appears that the police, the CPS and the Criminal Cases Review Commission didn't act on that DNA evidence, potentially because of the cost of having to carry out extra DNA checks. Are there questions for the Director of Public Prosecutions at the time to answer over this, do you think? Of course, that person would have been Keir Starmer.
Well, first of all, I think it's absolutely appalling miscarriage of justice what's happened. I was shocked when we first had the reports around the fact that an innocent man went to jail for a very long time. But then when we hear that there was a potential for that evidence and that information to be there to release the individual and to catch the real perpetrator of the crime, and that was a failed system that didn't do that. There is serious questions to ask about why that information wasn't provided and that they didn't go after the real perpetrator, who of course was then free to carry on doing these horrendous crimes. And an innocent man was in jail for way too long, and it's an appalling miscarriage of justice. So there is questions to be asked around what happened and why that happened, and what's going to be done to ensure that there isn't other people in the system like that and that won't happen again.
Have you had that conversation with Keir Starmer? He was the Director of Public Prosecutions. Shouldn't those questions be being put to him?
Well, I'm not sure whether Keir Starmer was involved in this particular case, but as you said in your outline, there are DPP. there was a number of organisations that were involved in this prosecution and in the subsequent appeal and what happened after that. And we need to get to the bottom of that and find out why this innocent man was kept in jail for as long as he was, when it's pretty clear from the reports that that didn't have to happen. And if a cost was an issue with that, that's just absolutely appalling. And that cannot happen in our justice system. People have to have confidence in our justice system. And the victim was failed because the real perpetrator wasn't caught. People were put at risk because that real perpetrator wasn't caught. And that innocent man was put in jail for a very long period of time, and his life was completely ruined by it. So this is an appalling case, and it does need to be investigated.
Are you going to ask Keir Starmer about it? Have you had a conversation with him about it?
I haven't had a conversation with Keir Starmer about it. I think the most important thing that we do now is find out exactly what happened and why this situation came about, and why the system failed this individual, the victim, and failed the safety of the public by allowing a criminal to carry on and potentially do more crimes when the evidence was there to suggest that an innocent man went to jail for something they didn't do.
Will you have a conversation with him about it now?
Well, we're all asking the question, which is what happened and why, and that is the absolute right thing to do. We need to make sure that this never happens again and find out exactly what happened, and people have to be accountable for that.
One question that I'm sure you've had a conversation with Keir Starmer about is whether or not the Labour Party supports self-identification, that is, without a medical certificate, for trans people as young as 16 or not. Now, Keir Starmer said yesterday that he would not have blocked Scotland's controversial gender recognition reforms, which, of course, were stopped in Westminster by Rishi Sunak. He does appear to be saying one thing to Parliament and Westminster and another thing when he is up north of the border. Rishi Sunak said yesterday, Keir Starmer has just U-turned on his own U-turn. First he was for self-ID, then he tried to convince us he was against it. Now he's for it, but only if you're in Scotland. Women and girls need their rights protecting no matter where they live in the UK. Rishi Sunak's right, isn't he?
So let me unpick this. Keir's saying that he believes in devolution and the Scottish government and their right to determine their laws. That's the first underlying fact, and I think that's the right thing to do. We were the party of devolution, and it's right that we respect that. We're also the party that believes in the, gender ID, and that people should be given respect in that. But we also believe there should be a process around that, and we've been very clear on that. The current process is inhumane. It doesn't help people, it doesn't protect people, and it doesn't support people. We want to bring in a system that recognises that people can transition, but has those safeguards and protections in place and support, because people need support going through that process. And we've also recognised that under our legislation that the last Labour government brought in, under the equalities legislation, is that there is, safeguards around women-only spaces. And that's been consistent. And it's about the detail of how you get to that destination. But, we are protective of trans rights, we're protective of women's rights, and we're the party of equality, and have delivered in government and will deliver that in government again.
Finally, before we let you go, Angela Rayner, it's been reported Rishi Sunak attended a Taylor Swift concert on his holidays. You've, of course, been pictured DJing in the past. Are you a Swiftie?
I mean, I like a bit of Shake It Off. She's all right. I mean, the concert ticket prices are quite expensive these days. I was trying to get some for Coldplay for my 15-year-old son for after his GCSEs next year. So there are challenges in trying to get to concerts these days, but, good on him.
Well done for weaving cost of living into a question about music. Angela Rayner, good to talk to you this morning. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's get a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
More rain for Friday, but the next few days mainly dry and warm. For now, it's mainly fine, if a little chilly in some rural spots, but there are some showers in the far north. An early fog will lift to leave plenty of sunshine through the morning, but northern Scotland will be cloudier.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to be returning to Sydney as England prepare to play Australia in the World Cup semi-final. And why e-bike riders are being urged to check their chargers or risk a fire.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that.
We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world.
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Five of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Welcome back to Sydney. We are counting down to the World Cup semi-final between England and Australia. It really feels like this should be the final in a way. It's so exciting here, really building up. The fans are gathering, just a couple of hours to go. I am surrounded by, I want to say yellow shirts, but it's actually yellow blankets. It's so cold here. Someone is making a killing selling Australia blankets to these fans, and they are buying them because it's going to be a cold, maybe very long night. Sports correspondent Rob Harris joins us now. And Rob, what are we thinking? Do we think it could be a long night, extra time, penalties? Should we have said the P word? I'm not sure. What do we think?
Oh, that was agony, wasn't it? Enduring the penalties in the previous rounds for England against Nigeria. But, of course, they had to go through it themselves. Australia against France, the longest ever penalty shootout, 20 spot kicks in total, but they prevailed. We'll be hoping it isn't as edgy, but since that England game against China, that's the only one really when the goals have been flowing. And, of course, perhaps they've been missing Lauren James the last game, of course, without Beth Mead at this tournament. So we've certainly not seen the goals firing in, but you've got Australia, who can always turn to Sam Kerr if she is fit to start, which she hasn't been yet here.
Do you know what? We were just talking to Courtney Sweetman-Kirk, who has been with the girls, with the Lionesses, and she said they're really relaxed about this match. You know, they actually got more out of the matches that they really struggled and had to fight for the victory in than they did against the match against China. Do you think they're going to relish going into this stadium and into a this cauldron of an atmosphere with hardly any fans shouting for them. How do you think they'll deal with that?
Well, Millie Bright, as England captain, was saying these are the types of occasions they thrive on. They've wanted for so many years to have packed stadiums, 70,000 plus as we're going to get in here. At the club level, they can often only have a few thousand. The game is still growing domestically, but they've got used to matches like at Wembley last year when they won the Euros final. And these are those big occasions. And this really has a sense of a blockbuster occasion here, even if it is a struggle to spot any England fans amongst us.
Absolutely. Matilda mayhem has absolutely gripped the country, and you could just tell by the number of people out here tonight and how difficult it is to get a ticket here. It's going to be one of the most watched TV sporting events in about 20 years in Australia. What are we thinking about the Matildas? Because they want their talisman Sam Kerr to play. We're not sure if she's going to. She has not been particularly fit this World Cup. Is it going to knock them if she doesn't play?
I mean, so much does revolve around her, so much of the build-up to this tournament about whether or not she would be fit after that blow of the calf injury to start with. And it seems like every day has been like updates on Australian TV. How's Sam Kerr doing? And yesterday, a bit of angst when she was pictured with some ice around her knee. So they are pinning their hopes on her, but they've got this far without even needing to rely on her. So imagine a fully fit Sam Kerr, what she could do. But it has not been the easiest to pass. They did lose a game in the group stage, unlike England, who have won every game. And the Australians will look at England as European champions, the highest ranked side left, and think they're going to be a threat. And this has, though, been a tournament with a lot of shocks. In fact, we saw Sweden go out last night, ranked higher than England, losing to Spain. Teams are on the rise now, and there are upsets. The playing field is levelling.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, they seem to be obsessed with Sam Kerr for sure around these parts, and it will be interesting whether she starts or comes on as a super sub. We'll see. I'm joined now by Jude Morris-King, who's one fan who's made the journey all the way to Sydney from England, and another England fan, Daniel Callister from Kent. Welcome, guys. And Jude, first of all, have you come all the way especially to watch this match, or have you been following the whole thing?
We've come up from Manchester, and we've been over here for 3 weeks, and I think this is about our 7th or 8th live game now.
Wow, brilliant. It does feel a bit like Manchester, doesn't it, tonight? There you are in a T-shirt. It's absolutely freezing. In a way, that's good for the Lionesses, isn't it?
I reckon so. It's been a lovely day. Just gets a bit chilly at night, but we can handle that. We're strong stuff, us English.
Now, of course, Matildas have made history by reaching the semi-finals, and they want even more history by reaching a World Cup final. But what about the Lionesses? Because they will almost expect to be at this stage of a major tournament. They're going to want to get to this final desperately, aren't they?
Absolutely. This is the 3rd World Cup semi-final that England have got to now, so we really want to go that extra step and get to the final at the weekend.
Now, Daniel, I want to bring you in because you're from Kent.
Yep.
But talk to me, because you don't sound like you're from Kent, but I'm loving the colours and the effort tonight.
No, so I moved over here about 10 years ago, but it didn't stop me from supporting England, so here we are.
And why is it that you support England? Because it was your nan that made you support England, wasn't it?
No, so she made me support Leicester, but, you know, she also made me support England, and I'm not going to say no.
You can't get away from Matilda's or Tilly's mayhem in Australia at all. They're on every channel, they're on every newspaper. How have you managed to stand out and decide to wear the England colours? Because you must be very unpopular with your friends.
Oh, I'm very unpopular. They're all messaging me right now, but I'm English and I'm proud to show it. We're going to get the win tonight.
Your prediction's quite bold. Tell us.
Oh, I'm saying 2-0 inside the 90 minutes.
Oh, that is very bold, but that sounds quite relaxing, so we'll take that. What do you think, Jude, tonight?
90 minutes, 3-2 England.
High scoring. They haven't scored that many goals. Does that worry you so far? No?
No, not at all. We've only conceded twice. We've been scoring. We've been improving every game. So tonight's the night. Bring it on, girls.
The defence has been really good, hasn't it?
It's been solid. Alex Greenwood has been our player of the tournament, in my opinion. So solid at the back. Nice free kicks going in. We're gonna beat them tonight.
OK, guys, enjoy the match. I hope you get the result that you want.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed. Enjoy. Yes, the defence for England has been absolutely superb at this World Cup. A few more goals would be brilliant. If they could turn the taps for the goal machines on tonight, that would be amazing. But just a couple of hours to go now to kick off this amazing semi-final between the Matildas and the Lionesses here at the Olympic Stadium in Sydney. Jane, back to you.
Thanks very much, Jackie. Back to you in a short while. Now, North Korea has claimed that a US soldier who was detained after crossing the border last month entered the country because of poor treatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. Our Asia correspondent Helen Smith is in Beijing with the latest.
This is the latest update in the remarkable story of Private Travis King. We found out just about a month ago that Private King had taken a tourist tour up to that border between North and South Korea. It's a pretty major tourist area. And then, according to eyewitnesses, he made this sudden and very concerted dash across the border from South Korea into North Korea and straight into the custody of North Korean officials. And it was a pretty shocking and intriguing story at the time. And since then, about a month ago, we've heard almost nothing from the North Koreans, and certainly many of Private King's family members saying how worried they've been. But that's come to an end today because North Korean state media has released a bit of information about Travis King. In that information, they essentially say that he chose to defect to North Korea because of, quote, inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. It says also that he was willing to seek refuge in the DPRK, which is North Korea, or a third country, and saying that he's disillusioned at unequal American society. Look, the American authorities, for their part, and the Pentagon saying that at the moment this is impossible to verify these statements, and they've said over multiple weeks that they've been trying every avenue to make contact and to establish Private King's whereabouts and well-being. It is worth saying that although we can't verify it, we do know that that Travis King was going through a relatively troubled period of his life. He'd just completed a jail term in South Korea where he'd been charged with assault. His family members had told US networks that he was struggling with the loss of a young family member, that he had faced racism of some form in the army. So it was obviously a difficult time for him. Worth saying, of course, everything from North Korea we should take with a major degree of caution because, of course, having a US soldier in their custody is a major propaganda opportunity for them.
Helen Smith reporting there. Well, also this morning, take a look at this. E-bike and e-scooter owners are being urged to check their chargers to avoid a fire. This video is by the charity Electrical Safety First, and it simulates a battery being overcharged before bursting into flames. Its survey of 1,000 e-bike and e-scooter users in the UK found almost half of them were using chargers incompatible with their devices. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Thanks very much for joining us. Coming up after the break, we're going to be crossing live to Hawaii. We're going to talk to a family who are desperately hunting for one of their lost family members.
We were just finishing a meal and our army boy ran up the steps and he said, "You've got half an hour. Grab what you can and I'll be back in half an hour." And that was our beginning of leaving because we had to get over the bridge before they blew it up. We were we were staying with Uncle Tom and everybody, of course, was making to the harbour. And Mum said, "Yes, all right, then we'll go." So off we went, right through all the bombed area and all the dead bodies and heads stuck on bridges and all sorts of things. When we got there and we got into the head of the queue again, they refused to allow us to go on the ship because we were not government people. My father was employed from Singapore. He wasn't employed from London.
But then you ended up in the notorious Changi prisoner of war camp as a little girl.
Yes.
How was that?
Really, in a sense, excited. You know, we were all children. And meeting new friends, because all of them were, you know, more or less the same age. And with my brother, he always seemed to gather people. He was such a friendly person. So it was all running around, oh, we've got this room, or, you know, things like that. So it was all started beautifully in that sense. But, and then it, you know, came down and down, yes.
How did you cope with being exposed to such horror at a young age?
I don't know. It's just one of these things you do. You know, it's there. You've got no choice. You do it. It's the same like going to a new school. You just followed, you know, what you were told to do, and that was it. Another thing too, in that sort of situation, we had to get to know the guards. They couldn't speak English, and we didn't speak Japanese, and so it was all, you know, hand in, you know, gestures, you know, what they wanted us to do.
Let's turn now to the devastating wildfires in Hawaii, as today the governor of the islands has reported that the death toll has risen. Over 100 people are now known to have died there. Well, as the search for the hundreds missing continues, some of those who have lost their lives in the deadly wildfires are slowly beginning to be identified. Amongst those now known to have died is Buddy L. Jantok, and I'm joined now by Buddy's granddaughter, Keisha Alake, and her husband, Kaipo Alake. Very good to talk to you both. Thank you very much for joining us. And I'm awfully sorry to hear about your loss, Keisha, of your grandfather. He was one of those who've been identified as dying. Where was he, and how was he not able to escape, do you think?
Those are the answers we're waiting for. We weren't told the exact details on exactly where he was found. And we don't know the reasoning on, we don't know anything about the evacuation plans or what was put into place at the time of the fire, or even before that. We don't know anything yet.
He lived in a retirement home. Did he have mobility issues, or as far as you know, he would have been able to get himself out?
He did move on the slower side. You know, he took his time walking and whatnot, but he was really independent. He was still driving and working. So I think if there was enough time to let them know, he would have had a better chance of surviving the fire.
Tell us a little bit about him. What kind of man was he?
He was
always happy.
He never let anything negative come in his way. Music was, besides us, his family was the love of his life. Always smiling, always laughing.
And when did you last speak to him or see him?
The day before the fire. I had spoke to him. I talked to him every other day, even if it was just something he's seen on the news, or, you know, something he's seen that he wanted me to buy for him, because he wasn't one with technology. So those late night infomercials, he wanted to try something, he would call me. So I talked to him the day before, and even with just severe weather, you know, thunderstorms or whatnot, he would call me and let me know, I'm okay, it's Papa, I'm okay, just raining a lot. So when I didn't hear from him, with everything going on, I knew something was wrong.
And Kaipo, you know, it's obviously really hard for Keisha. You're in Honolulu, you're watching this all from a distance. That must be really difficult.
The wait, I think, was excruciating, painful, but at least we have somewhat of closure. We understand that there's many more people out there who have lost loved ones. And I'm hoping that we all get answers somehow.
And Keisha, that is a good point, isn't it? Because there are still so many people just missing. At least, although it is the worst possible news, you know what has happened to your granddad. Do you have any idea when you're going to have an opportunity to recover his body and have a funeral?
I'm not sure. I've spoke with mortuaries and FEMA to see how I can bring him home here. A lot of the family is here. And from there, once I can get that confirmation, then we can go ahead and put him to rest. But as of right now, I know he was one out of the two that's been, identified and the name's been put out there. So I think we're playing this by ear right now on what to do next.
And Kaipo, what do you feel about the way that the authorities there have handled this? Are you being given all the support that you think that you could be?
I have a lot of mixed emotions. I want to say yes. We're just frustrated and angry. We're having a difficult time understanding pretty much on why things
was handled the way it was. I think the support system we have with the officers and whatnot, that's just been the greatest support. But I think now since we know that he didn't make it, now it's the why, then how, what could have been done to at least try and save not just him, but there's so much people unaccounted for right now. And I know they can't just get in and get it done, but for even just the retirement home he lived in, we haven't heard anything from them. I just wanted to know, was there a plan? Was there any warning for them there? Knowing that it's filled with all elderly people, I was just wondering if there was a plan for any natural disaster or a fire or whatnot, but we haven't heard from them at all. And that was one of the first places I reached out to when I couldn't find him or get in touch with him. A lot of our leads and help came from family out in Maui and social media.
It's a really difficult way to find out about these kind of things, isn't it? Keisha and Kaipo Alake, really kind of you to talk to us today. Thank you. And I'm so sorry again about your granddad.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Ukraine has accused Russia of an act of piracy after Moscow released a video of its navy storming a cargo ship on the Black Sea on Sunday. The video shows the vessel's crew kneeling on deck with their hands on their heads. Then body cam footage shows armed Russian servicemen checking the ship before entering the bridge.
Stop machine! Stop it, Jayne! Stop it, Jayne! Keep calm and listen to me! Okay. Sit down, please sit down! Please sit down. Keep calm and listen to me. What is the captain? This is captain. Speak English.
Well, Moscow said that the Navy fired warning shots at the vessel after it failed to respond to a request to stop. Ukraine called the boarding of the ship a deliberate attack and called for the international community to recognise Russia's actions as a crime. Now, with a combined age of over 200 years, a group of adventurers will attempt to become the oldest crew to cross the Atlantic Ocean in an open basket balloon. They're going to fly from Maine in the US across the Atlantic and land in Europe, and the crew will cover thousands of miles over a period of 5 days. One of those who's going to be in the basket is Sir David Hempelman-Adams. He is, of course, a well-known and well-experienced explorer, and he joins me now. Lovely to talk to you today. You've done Arctic expeditions, you've done Antarctic expeditions. Why across the ocean in a balloon now?
Well, a couple of different things. I've done it before as a solo flight, But a very good friend of mine, Bert Padell in the States, phoned me up just before COVID and said, "I'd like to do this. Would you go with me?" And I said, "No, I'm getting too old for this." And then he persuaded me. And I thought, well, let's give it a go. It'd be much easier, hopefully, with the two pilot. But we're doing quite a lot of science. So that's where the third person comes in. Frederick Paulson is a scientist. So we're going to be doing quite a lot of science going across. So this Touareg Atlantic balloon is a beautiful balloon. And we'll be taking off, as you said, from Maine sometime in September and landing. All I want is dry feet. So anywhere in Europe would be very nice.
And of course, with experience, as you've mentioned, comes age. The three of you, this combined age of 200 years. Do you think that's going to pose any challenges?
Well, I'm just 25, so I'll just be looking after the other two and cooking for them and making sure that they get plenty of sleep. But I think with age comes hopefully wisdom and a bit of experience. We're all pretty experienced in flying. So hopefully, fingers crossed, we should be able to do it safely. That's the main thing.
And you're planning to start your journey in September, but it does depend, of course, on the weather. What sort of conditions do you need?
Well, as you've just said, it's an open basket, so we don't want to go too high. Otherwise, we'll be on oxygen the whole way over. And the other thing is it's going to be relatively cold, so we don't want to be too high as well. So we're looking for a profile from about 5,000 feet up to about 15,000 feet across, nothing higher than that. And each day we will slowly, progressively get higher coming into, hopefully, Europe.
And I feel like I ask you this question every time I interview you, but is this the last one? Is this the last big adventure, or have you got some more fuel in the tank for another one?
Well, I always say never again, and you're quite right. You keep asking, and I say never again, and they get me down to the pub, and my willpower is awfully... I've got no willpower whatsoever. So they always persuade me by the end of the night. So that's the problem.
Sir David Adams, endless adventurer. Very good to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And he's off. Well, you're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up, we're going to be crossing back to Sydney for the football. Stay with us.
morning from Sydney and to one of sport's oldest rivalries. It is, of course, England versus Australia, and this time, for the first time ever, it's in the semi-final of the World Cup. The Lionesses say they are ready and they plan to take their game to the Matildas before a sellout crowd of 75,000 Australians.
I think we're going to win. We're going to make the Poms work hard.
The Lionesses have got that edge. We'll show that tonight.
Here in London, a sharp fall in inflation. Falling energy prices help bring down inflation to 6.8%, but economists predict more interest rate rises are still likely. From ABC to AI, 2/3 of teachers say kids are using artificial intelligence to do their homework. Plus, check your charger or risk a catastrophic explosion. The warning to e-bike owners. Good morning. Not long to go now until the World Cup semi-final in Australia, in Sydney. The Lionesses, we are hoping, will roar. The Matildas may well waltz. We will be cheering them on from here, and we'll be returning to Jackie out there very shortly. But first, the breaking news in the UK this morning, that inflation fell to 6.8% in July, down sharply from 7.9% the previous month. The Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, has welcomed the news, saying it shows the government's actions are working, but economists predict more interest rate rises are still likely. I'm joined by our business correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, and our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Gurpreet, to you first of all. So good news for the government. The numbers have come down. Critics will say, though, that the cost of living and food price inflation is still incredibly high.
Yeah, it's important to put these figures in context. So we've had another big drop in inflation, or in the inflation rate, but prices are still rising. They're just rising less quickly than they were a while ago. So we're now at 6.8%. That's down from 7.9% in June, but considerably lower than where we were towards the end of last year, when prices were rising above 11%. The slowdown this time round, it's been driven by a drop in energy prices. Ofgem has lowered the energy price cap, which has filtered through into a lower inflation rate. Food price inflation has also come down, but once again, food prices are still rising an annual rate of about 14%. So it's still really painful for households. But things are moving in the right direction when it comes to inflation. And that figure of 6.8%, as you just mentioned, that's in line with the Bank of England's own forecasts, which means that we're on target to reduce inflation or to halve inflation by the end of the year. But 6.8%, it's still more than 3 times the Bank of England's 2% target. And there are other worrying signs like core inflation, which is a measure of underlying price pressures in the economy. That's still really stubborn and sticky in the UK. And also wages are rising far too quickly for the Bank of England's liking. So all of this suggests that the Bank of England will once again have to raise interest rates in September.
So, Tamara, politically, we're not out of the woods yet, are we? I mean, the government will say, oh, Rishi Sunak's doing really well. He's going to get it down to his halving it by the end of their target. The opposition will say, well, this is a mess of their own creation.
Yeah, so sighs of relief that it's at least going in the right direction and looks set to meet Rishi Sunak's target of 5% by the end of the year. But when Jeremy Hunt says this is the result of the tough action we have taken, many of the figures feeding into this are completely beyond the government's control. A lot of the work here has been done by falling oil and gas prices, for example, and inflation is still being held up by very high food prices. So while the fall in oil and gas prices can allow the government to call it a victory, of course, they're at the mercy of things changing. And in particular, there's some concern that on public sector pay, where NHS staff got a one-off payment, that is yet to feed through into the inflation figures. We also, as Gurpreet was saying, expect now more strongly that interest rates will rise. And so while wages are strong, they're at their strongest since 2001, you could end up with a pay rise, but also paying much higher mortgage bills. So all these things may balance out, so people still feel they're feeling the squeeze and aren't particularly any better off. Labour say that inflation is still higher here than it is in comparable G7 countries, so the government has still got a lot of work to do. And the opposition also point out that people's bills, whether that is energy or rail fares, are going up compared to a year ago, although the government has tried to head that off by saying that the July measure of inflation will not be used to calculate rail fares in January, as it usually is, and they will announce later what exactly that rise will be.
OK, Tamara and Gurpreet, thank you both very much for now. That is the big news economically here. But, of course, the other large news today is the football. Let's take you across to Jackie in Sydney, where the Lionesses will be warming up very shortly, won't they, in order to defeat the Matildas. Jackie, give us more.
Jayne, I did not know you were a Matildas fan. Look at you in your yellow shirt, resplendent this morning. Who knew? Good morning from Sydney, evening here, just a couple of hours to go, and the atmosphere is really building. It's getting noisier, it's getting more packed. There are so many yellow shirts and blankets and scarves. Scarves sold out this morning, so if you wanted one, you can't get any of them for love nor money. Probably get an England one. I've barely seen any England fans. They will not be hearing any cheers, I don't think, the Lionesses in that stadium. This, of course, the biggest match ever between these two sides, England and Australia. They've never met competitively on a football pitch, and here we are at the highest level, the semi-final of the World Cup. Now, the semi-final is a place where England are quite comfortable. They've made the last two semi-finals, never got past this stage. They're looking to make a bit of history. The Matildas have never been this far either, and of course they think they can go all the way. All of these fans are convinced the Matildas are going to win tonight. And let's cross to our sports correspondent, Rob Harris. Rob, a lot of confident Australians around you, and actually it's a really lovely atmosphere, a bit like the Euros. A lot of children, a lot of young girls, and this has really captured the imagination of the country, this, hasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It's a really boisterous atmosphere, and we're keeping an eye on the fans arriving from the metro, and it is just a sea of yellow, a few England fans amongst them, because this is the hot ticket that all Australians wanted, which is not something you would hear often when you're talking about football in a country more obsessed with Aussie rules football, rugby, cricket, but perhaps it's the Ashes rivalry that we carried over it a bit into this match that really has become a bit of a grudge match, but maybe only amongst the fans, because speaking to the players, they've been playing it down a bit, although certainly the England captain Millie Bright yesterday saying that they're hoping that perhaps they can exploit that pressure that the Matildas might be feeling.
Yes, I was going to ask you that, Rob, that, you know, the Matildas have not been to a semi-final of a World Cup before. This is the home World Cup. That with it is going to bring plenty of pressure. They're going to be nervous, aren't they?
Oh, surely. They won't be used to these big occasions. The Lionesses have got used to packed Wembley for the Euros final, even friendlies as well. But this is a huge occasion, as we've seen the momentum build behind the Matildas. And they have, though, been performing when it matters. They coped with the pressure of that penalty shootout against France in the previous round, the longest ever World Cup penalty shootout. And yet they found a way to secure victory with their 10th kick, so they've made it this far, and they certainly want this to continue all the way into the final. The Lionesses, as you say, have been to semi-finals so often now at World Cups. The last two, they've been to finals with the Euros, winning it last year. So there's a lot of expectation on their shoulders, particularly for Sarina Wiegman to deliver, but we don't really reach finals that often. This is a huge moment, and it was inside here, of course, where the men won the Rugby World Cup in 2003 against Australia.
And let's not forget that the defence of the Lionesses has been absolutely superb in this World Cup. So the Matildas will have to breach that first, despite all of their confidence. They've got to do that. Back in England is our correspondent Becky Cottrell, and she's at Highbury Wolves Football Club in North London. Becky, what's going on there?
I'm going to spend the day with... Well, I'm going to be spending the day with some of the girls who play here. They're training now, but we are going to be watching the game together at 11. And I've got a couple of the players here, as well as their coach, Vic, and team captain, Amika. Now, I did just hear you making a bet. What were you betting? What's at stake here?
I think it's going to be 2-0 to England. I think it'll be 2 with penalties and England will win.
OK, and there was some debate about what's on the table here, but maybe £10.
Yeah.
And you were telling me before, Vic, that you have noticed the difference that the Lionesses performance has made in terms of girls getting involved with playing here.
Yeah, there's lots more teams, like, especially around where I live, like, our club has introduced 2 new teams. There's lots of players coming into our club, girls players, and I think everybody is, like, more excited to watch women's football after the Lionesses won at Europe.
And it feels like there are kind of more opportunities as well for players your age, you're both 12, if you want to, you know, continue playing going forward.
Yeah, lots of people from our club have now joined academies, so they could end up playing professionally, so there's definitely a lot more opportunities.
And how do you think the Lionesses have been performing so far in this tournament?
They've been playing pretty well, but I think they played a bit better in the Euros than right now.
Yeah, we all remember that. And Ash, as well, we were chatting before about sort of the funding that needs to go in to support more girls playing football. Just talk to me a bit about that.
Well, these are top players, and irrespective of gender, the top players deserve the top facilities. And the top facilities don't happen without funding, which is why government support is so crucial for girls like Vic and Amika and teams like the Highbury Wolves to develop.
Yeah, thank you, Ash. Thanks, girls. So I might not be at Stadium Australia, but I think this is a pretty good place to be watching the game later. Back to you, Jackie.
Apologies, we've lost the sound to Jackie in Australia. If only she could hear me, I could tell her it is yellow, not gold. But let's move on to stories here in the UK. And police and the Crown Prosecution Service allegedly knew back in 2007 that another man's DNA was on the clothes of the woman that Andrew Malkinson was wrongly imprisoned for raping. But he was left behind bars for another 13 years. While talking to this programme a little earlier this morning, Labour's Deputy Leader Angela Rayner said that the latest developments needed investigating.
We need to get to the bottom of that and find out why this innocent man was kept in jail for as long as he was, when it's pretty clear from the reports that that didn't have to happen. And if a cost was an issue with that, that's just absolutely appalling. And that cannot happen in our justice system. People have to have confidence in our justice system. And the victim was failed because the perpetrator, the real perpetrator, wasn't caught. People were put at risk because that real perpetrator wasn't caught. And an innocent man was put in jail for a very long period of time, and his life was completely ruined by it. So this is an appalling case, and it does need to be investigated.
Well, Sky's Sadia Chowdhury joins me here now, and Sadia, even more questions for this man who's gone through so much and is still trying to rebuild his life, when it becomes clear that a number of organisations didn't seem to do what they should have done.
Yeah, it's not only a huge miscarriage of justice in the fact that he spent 17 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit, but the spotlight really now on the appeals system and how that may have failed him. So if you remember, a few weeks ago, we saw him on the steps of the Court of Appeal just after he had his conviction quashed. The judges in that case said that it was because they found new evidence to suggest that the DNA found on this victim's clothing matched somebody else, not Andrew Malkinson. He came out onto the steps. He talked about how he's maintained his innocence, and because of maintaining his innocence, he spent a further 10 years in jail, so a total of 17 years. Now we're getting these details that actually that evidence that the Court of Appeal judges talked about perhaps was already known to authorities, the CPS and Greater Manchester Police. According to The Guardian's reporting today, which they cite from Andrew Malkinson's case files, show that the CPS and the Greater Manchester Police were aware of this, and not only were they aware of it, they didn't pass that information on, they didn't take any further actions. Now, it's really important to note that the organisation that deals with potentially unsafe convictions and refers them to the Court of Appeal, that's the CCRC, the Criminal Cases Review Commission. If they didn't get that from the CPS, that's potentially really serious, because we know that Andrew Malkinson went to them in 2012 to try and get an appeal, and they refused him. Had they not been aware of this, or had that information not been passed on to them, Those are things that he's going to now try to establish. This is all according to the case files that, as I say, the newspaper has seen. Now, we've, of course, contacted the CPS and Greater Manchester Police and the CCRC for comment. We haven't heard back from them yet, but the CPS has told the Guardian that that information wasn't new. They say that they did pass that on to Mr Malkinson's defence lawyers. He says he's still waiting for an apology from the CPS.
OK, Sadia, thank you very much. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Lots more to come after the break, including... why e-bike riders are being urged to check their chargers or risk a fire. And an urgent warning to cat owners following a spate of poisonings.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
I'm so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that.
We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world.
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Welcome back to Sydney. We are counting down to the World Cup semi-final between England and Australia, the Lionesses versus the Chillies. Now, we have been trying to find some England fans here this evening in Australia. It's very difficult, easier said than done, but I found one. I found two ladies, actually, who are great friends. One is an England fan and one is an Australia fan. Let's talk to you, first of all, Teresa Hermanson.
Yes, hi.
I mean, you stand out like a sore thumb round here, don't you?
True.
You're quite brave. You're going to have to shout loudly, you know this.
Yes, I know that. But I've been a fan for a year since the Euros, so I believe the Lionesses are going to win it.
You've only been a fan since the Euros?
Yes.
What made you suddenly think I'm going to support the Lionesses?
Because I live in London.
Right.
For a long time, and it's amazing to follow. So I follow Arsenal, and they're everywhere. The Arsenal players on all the Women's World Cup teams, so it's exciting. But the Lionesses need to win it.
And do you think they will win it tonight?
Yes, I definitely think they will.
Well, your friend is shaking her head. Ali Grove.
Yes.
You're great friends, and you've come out tonight. What an occasion! We are surrounded by golden blankets. It's quite cold, but I don't think once you get in there, you're going to feel the cold whatsoever.
Well, as you know, because you sent us all your convicts, we're a tough breed. So we've got everything it takes. We've got the 3 T's. So we've got ticker, talent, and tenacity. So we're going in there. And look, I feel kind of sorry for her. I've seen at least 10 fans. So 10 out of 80,000. She'll be an excellent company. Yeah.
But you're going to be very bad company if you lose.
Look, that's one of the things I think this competition has shown us is how generous women are and how sports person-like they really are. You don't see that aggression. You see really...
We'll be friends after, no matter what.
Yeah, no matter what.
And you know what? The Matildas have done so well to get to their first semi-final. And they have literally set the world alight. Well, certainly really this country alight. And there'll be so many kids wanting to play football because of them.
Absolutely. And I think it's wonderful for women's sport in general. My oldest daughter is a retired elite athlete, and they struggle for money, they struggle for recognition, they struggle for playing spaces. This has just amplified it and brought it to the world's attention, and it's really exciting.
It is really exciting. Now, I've got 2 young fans here with me. All right, tell us your name.
I'm Jamie.
And you're?
I'm Isla.
And Isla, your brother and sister?
Yeah.
Right, who is your favourite player?
Probably Ellie Carpenter.
Okay, and why do you like her?
She plays my position.
And what's your position?
Right back.
Yeah, good. What are you expecting tonight? Give us a prediction.
I reckon 3-1 to Australia.
Good boy. Good lad.
Now, who's your favourite player? I just want to do this. Is it her? Is it her? Sam Kerr.
I love Hayley Razzo. I think she's amazing. She plays with such competitive generosity. If that makes sense. She's so nice on and off the field, but she still plays fiercely, which I think you need to.
Okay, listen guys, thank you for joining us. Waiting in the cold. Have a fantastic evening. I sort of wish you have a more fantastic evening than them though.
I do too.
Yeah. Sorry.
Thank you.
Did not say that. Completely neutral. Hayley Razzo is their top scorer actually, and has been scoring at will at this World Cup. Hopefully it won't be that tonight for the Lionesses.
Indeed, Jackie, thanks very much. Now, with this year's A-level results to be released tomorrow, Sky News has taken a look at the effects artificial intelligence is having on education. 2/3 of teachers say that they believe students regularly hand in work written by AI and are calling for help to catch those cheating the system. Sky's Becky Johnson reports.
This is my Seneca learning. Currently,
Exam grades are expected to return to normal this year for the first time since the pandemic. But something else has been spreading into classrooms that isn't going away.
So I would particularly like to use it for my English work.
AI, artificial intelligence tools, are increasingly being used by pupils who've gone online for help with their work.
I use it a lot for online homework, revision tools, so if I need any additional support, maybe I don't want to ask my teacher or it's something that she can't give me, it is available whenever I need it on AI programmes.
I would say a large proportion of school children do use AI, especially for homework.
This is the type of thing students can use AI for.
It can write essays within a matter of seconds and save teachers time with lesson planning. There are benefits, but obvious concerns.
There definitely needs to be government regulation, especially from a safeguarding point of view. What is appropriate use in the classroom? How can they learn from it? How can they get better understanding of concepts? But actually, what is cheating and what is good practice?
And is there concern that pupils are using it to cheat?
There is concern, absolutely, because teachers haven't been equipped with what they need in terms of pulling together that understanding. So they need that support so that they can spot it.
66% of teachers believe they're regularly receiving work written by AI. More than half want better training in it, and 31% want the government to introduce regulation to police its use. A government spokesperson told us artificial intelligence has the potential to transform education and they've launched an online consultation on the benefits and risks. How to make the best use of rapidly advancing technology is a question for school leaders and politicians. Becky Johnson, Sky News.
Also in the news this morning, take a look at this. E-bike and e-scooter owners are being urged to check their chargers to avoid a fire. This video is by the charity Electrical Safety First and simulates a battery being overcharged before bursting into flames. Its survey of 1,000 e-bike and e-scooter users in the UK found almost half of them were using chargers that were incompatible with their devices. A plume of black smoke was seen billowing from a wind turbine off the Norfolk coast. The company that owns Scroby Sands wind farm says no one was on board the turbine when the fire broke out. Police have issued an urgent warning to cat owners in the Swindon area after 4 animals died after being poisoned in recent days. Wiltshire Police has opened a joint investigation with the RSPCA and has warned cat owners in the Emerald Crescent area of Blunsdon St Andrew to keep a close eye on their pets. Very specific area. North Korea has claimed that a US soldier who was detained after crossing the border last month entered the country because of poor treatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. Our Asia correspondent Helen Ann Smith is in Beijing with the latest.
This is the latest update in the remarkable story of Private Travis King. We found out just about a month ago that Private King had taken a tourist tour up to that border between North and South Korea. It's a pretty major tourist area. And then, according to eyewitnesses, he made this sudden and very concerted dash across the border from South Korea into North Korea and straight into the custody of North Korean officials. And it was a pretty shocking and intriguing story at the time. And since then, about a month ago, we've heard almost nothing from the North Koreans, and certainly many of Private King's family members saying how worried they've been. But that's come to an end today because North Korean state media has released a bit of information about Travis King. In that information, they essentially say that he chose to defect to North Korea because of, quote, inhuman maltreatment and racial discrimination in the US Army. It says also that he was willing to seek refuge in the DPRK, which is North Korea, or a third country, and saying that he's disillusioned at unequal American society. Look, the American authorities, for their part, and the Pentagon saying that at the moment this is impossible to verify these statements, and they've said over multiple weeks that they've been trying every avenue to make contact and to establish Private King's whereabouts and well-being. It is worth saying that although we can't verify it, we do know that that Travis King was going through a relatively troubled period of his life. He'd just completed a jail term in South Korea where he'd been charged with assault. His family members had told US networks that he was struggling with the loss of a young family member, that he had faced racism of some form in the army. So it was obviously a difficult time for him. Worth saying, of course, everything from North Korea we should take with a major degree of caution because, of course, having a US soldier in their custody is a major propaganda opportunity for them.
Helen Ann Smith there. Right, let's get a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go.
To fly, to fly.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
More rain to come on Friday, but the next few days look mainly warm and dry. For now, mainly fine, if a little chilly in some rural spots, but there are some showers in the far north. Any early fog will soon lift to leave plenty of sunshine through the morning, but northern Scotland will be cloudier. It'll stay mainly dry, but there'll be a few light showers around, with almost anywhere at risk. The calm conditions, though, mean it'll feel quite warm where you get sunshine. The afternoon will see showers mainly becoming confined to the north and west. They will fade overnight, leaving most places dry, but northeastern Britain will see low cloud developing. Also some mist and fog in places, and that will lift tomorrow morning.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Coming up after the break on Sky News Breakfast, we'll be back live in Sydney as England prepare to play Australia in the World Cup semi-final.
Welcome back to Sydney. We are counting down to the World Cup semi-final between England and Australia, the Lionesses against the Matildas. And I am completely surrounded by a sea of yellow and green tonight. Yellow and green blankets because it is quite cold. Very, very hard to spot any England fans here at all. I think maybe we've seen about 5. That is it. Our sports correspondent, Rob Harris, and Sky's Nicole Johnson are here in Sydney as well to help us look forward to the start of this game in about an hour and a half's time. Let's go and speak to Rob, first of all, who's down there in that sea of yellow. And Rob, we were talking about Sam Kerr, the star player for the Australians, whether she would start or not start. She's been injured. The Lionesses have had to plan for playing against her or not playing against her. Have there been many mind games so far?
Well, there's been one attempt by an Australian newspaper. There's a helicopter over England training, posted the pictures of that. Didn't seem to give away much, and we've just discovered now the Lionesses lineup is in to face Australia, and they're unchanged from the side that beat Colombia. So Sarina Wiegman sticking with the same starting 11. Of course, she doesn't have Lauren James available, serving the second game of her suspension, and we await to discover just how will the Matildas line up. Will Sam Kerr be fit enough to start the first time at this World Cup?
And every time you talk to somebody here or you turn on the television, they talk about winning the Ashes, although they should say retaining the Ashes. They talk about winning the netball, and they hark back to the friendly victory over the Lionesses back in April in Brentford. Does any of that matter tonight to this England team?
Well, it doesn't seem to matter to the players. Millie Bright, the England captain, really not really sensing that rivalry at all. But they know how much it actually means to the fans, how it really feeds off the frenzy of the adversary nature between the countries, and really the Ashes, the rugby, we do thrive on that really, and it does add to this intensity atmosphere as around us the fans are starting to arrive. And the announcement overhead says they're expecting 100,000 people in the area, and the gates are just starting to open here, so you can see them arrive, and it looks like every bit of Matilda's merchandise in the city has been snapped up, certainly from what I've seen walking around today.
Rob, thanks very much indeed. Let's go to Nicole Johnson, who is now in a fan zone. And Nicole, it is extraordinary, the confidence of Australians in this match. They are convinced they are going to win it and also win the whole thing.
Yes, there's a huge amount of confidence amongst the Australians and a lot of love, of course, for the Matildas. As Rob was saying, their popularity has been growing and growing as this tournament has progressed. Months and years ago, they weren't that well known, though they were on the rise. But now many of those main players have essentially become household names. As you said, I'm at one of the fan zones here in Sydney, but there are fan zones all over the country, not only in Australia's major state capitals, but in small country towns, because many of the players themselves are, in fact, from rural and remote parts of the country. Now, we're here to speak to a couple of fans that we've just met who have come all the way from the UK, Anna and Natalie. Anna, what made you decide to come out tonight to watch this? And you do look a bit confused. You are seeming to support both England and Australia.
Yeah. I think it's just a really nice atmosphere here. And seeing women get so far, especially women from England and everything, it's just so inspiring, and it always motivates me when I see people achieve big things.
Are you going for England, though?
Maybe a 60-40 split, possibly.
Natalie, who do you think will win?
Well, I think the Matildas will win, but I kind of want England to win, obviously. But as you can see, we kind of support both sides, so I don't really mind.
That's very fair of you, actually. Why do you think the Matildas will win?
Because I'm not actually sure, but I think having all this support will help.
And do you play football yourself?
A little bit. I'm not very good, but it's such a fun hobby and very popular in the UK.
After watching it for the last few weeks, are you keen to play now?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's very inspiring being here.
Well, have a great night, and thanks for joining us on Sky. So you can see this huge upswell of support behind us, as the girls were saying. The Australian team, the Matildas, do have the country behind them, and the Lionesses know that. They're going to go out to a potentially hostile crowd.
Well, the coverage and the build-up to this match has been wall-to-wall here in Australia for the last 24 hours. I'm wondering what the traction is back in England. Back in England is Becky Cottrell, our correspondent. She's at Highbury Wolves Football Club in North London. Becky.
Yeah, I've been having a great morning with some young players, all excited to watch the game. And I've got a couple of them here, Zoe and Naverdiga. We were just chatting about more people getting involved in this club, and you said you have noticed a difference kind of since the Lionesses have been doing so well.
Yeah, I think that people have just realised that it's a really great opportunity, because before I think girls just didn't realise that that was an option for them, but now they're seeing that it's a really big thing.
I think now they're more encouraged, and now they see like the Lionesses be role models. They're more like excited to get out there and try it.
Yeah, and you said as well more people watching the game as well. More, you know, women, men, more interested in watching women's football.
Yeah, I just feel like before they didn't realise that it was a big thing. They thought it was just another thing, but once they've seen that the quality of play is actually really the same, or if not better than the men's, they've really liked it.
Now they've got the women, I think it's more like inclusive for everyone. So you can have role models that look different. They don't always have to be just men.
Yeah. OK, thanks, guys. Well, I'm going to let these guys get back to training then. We're going to head into the clubhouse to watch that game at 11, and all fingers crossed for the Lionesses.
Becky, thanks. Getting really noisy here now as people waltz past me and head towards the turnstiles to take their seats. And speaking of waltzing, I wonder if they will play Waltzing Matilda if the Matildas win this match tonight. Let's hope it's Sweet Caroline. Of course, that's what they play when the Lionesses win. We've heard it a lot. Let's hope we hear it again a little bit later on.
OK, Jackie, thanks very much. Well, the semi-final between the Lionesses and the Matildas is, of course, the latest clash in the England and Australia's long history of good-natured sporting rivalry. And joining me now to unpick it all is Australian-British author and broadcaster Kathy Lett, who's here on the studio. Lovely to see you.
Hi.
And, you know, you're looking on the face of it like you're supporting the Lionesses with your red coat, but I spotted the kangaroo earrings. Show us your outfit.
Well, I'm going on... All the Aussies are meeting at a pub in South London, so I've got to go on the tube, so I thought I'd better go undercover. So I'm just wearing this on the tube, and then when I get there... Ta-da! Australian flag. That's right. But I don't want to get mugged on the way.
OK. I was going to ask you if you're wearing Union Jack underwear, but I won't. I really won't.
News flash, literally. Yeah.
This relationship, it's been... I mean, you know, it's a lovely day today. It seems like the atmosphere down there is really, really great. But it's more serious when we come to things like the cricket, isn't it?
Well, it's fascinating that Australia and Britain, we have so much in common. You know, we share the same mental geography. We grew up on Shakespeare and Dickens and Austen and the Brontes and Monty Python and Spike Milligan and all the comedy we share. But our one area of contention is sporting rivalry, because we're both big sporting nations. And we're sort of like, you know, squabbling siblings when it comes to sport. And, you know, of course, we've just had the whole Ashes drama. So, and I didn't even like cricket. I used to think that, you know, I've had marriages that lasted less time than a test match. It's like the tantric version of sport where the only thing that gets sticky is the wicket. But I did sort of come on... Stephen Fry got me into cricket over the summer because it was just so exciting. So, yeah, but we do have this incredible sense of rivalry, and today I mean, it'll be on display.
We've been brought up on the same culture, but, you know, all that culture that you mentioned was British. What about Australian culture? I mean, if you're going to really compare it, you know, Corrie versus Neighbours.
Yeah.
Dua Lipa versus Kylie.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Russell Crowe versus Tom Hardy. Who wins?
Well, the big difference in our cultures, I would say, is that I do think the British have an Eeyore gene. You know, you seem to think that optimism is some kind of eye disease, whereas in Australia we are very optimistic people, which is why we're so sure we're going to win today. And we have chronic skepticism. We're sceptical about things, but we're not pessimistic. So I think that is a big difference in our culture. And also, even though I say we're very sporting, we're very cultured too. Australians read more books per head of population than any country in the world. So it's not just all beer and barbecues.
Because there's nothing to do in Australia.
Well, we like to surf our brainwaves, put it that way. But I love England too. You do conquer the great indoors here. There's no better place in the world for theatre and galleries and museums. So I'm lucky enough that I get to be in both societies. But today I have to show my true Aussie colours. Yeah.
Just looking at all the people down there, and one of the Matildas that Jackie was talking to earlier was hugging a Lioness fan and just saying, you know, it's rivalry, but there's a warmth to it when the women are involved.
Yes.
Do you know? Is it different because it's a women's match?
Well, isn't it fantastic that we're finally levelling the playing field, literally, when it comes to sport? Because women's sport it didn't get any support. It got no advertising. It got no support across the media. Nothing. So the fact that we're seeing a massive amount of interest in female sport is so gratifying. So I'm really excited about that. And you also don't get the bad behaviour that you get from the male footballers, do you? I mean, male footballers treat you like a football. They play footsie, make a pass, and then drop you as soon as they've scored. And definitely that doesn't happen with the female players. It's a classier game.
It's a classier game, and you know, strides have been made, but there's still a long way to go, isn't there? I mean, you know that the female team are still fighting for equal pay. Yeah. Women's teams still struggle to get stadium time. They still struggle to get the training facilities. There's a lot more to do, isn't there?
Yeah, well, of course, we live in a patriarchy, but this is helping. Now we've got so many men who are supporting the teams. That's the only time it's going to change, when the men join us at the barricades, which is happening. But if I don't know how I'm going to react if the Matildas... I think if the Lionesses win today, I'm going to just pretend to be English and round my vowels for a few days, because I couldn't bear you gloating at me. My lips will lose weight the amount of vowel rounding I'm going to do. You know, I'll have a vowel transplant. But if the Matildas win, I'll even flatten my vowels so I can gloat a little bit, because there is also this great sense of condescension from the Brits about Australia. You see us as a recessive gene, the kind of Irish of the Pacific. And since moving here, you know, I've looked up so many noses in my life, even people shorter than me. As soon as they hear the Aussie accent, you know, the noses would go up. So it'd be very nice that I can just have a little bit of light gloating. I'm going to exceed the daily recommended amount of smugness if we win.
We'll see. We'll see about that.
We'll see.
But I mean, there is you know, I'm not going to deny to you that how people have behaved to you, but you know, Britons love Australia. Yeah. You know, we go backpacking there. People, it's a real, you know, holiday destination of choice if people are able to afford it. It's such a long way to go. You know, there is a real love affair between England and Australia.
Oh, they're totally. We still call you the mother country, you know. And as a rite of passage as an Australian, you must come to the mother country and, you know, soak up the culture. And, of course, there's a great sense of friendship and camaraderie, except when it comes to sport, yes. So there might be handbags at dawn, there could be blood on the shag pile. I don't know how the day is going to play out, but I will be undercover on the tube.
Well done, Kathy, and thank you for coming in. Hopefully we won't have you back to talk about success in the final, but it's always great to have you here.
Yeah,
Thanks so much.
Lovely to see you, Jane.
You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Coming up after the break, how well does your horse know you, if you have one? Better than you might think, apparently. Nay.
Play Sky News.
From the Sky News Centre at 7.
Now that you're up to date, we can go into a bit more detail.
Things can change incredibly quickly.
Taken by surprise.
Have you ever known a moment like this in British politics before? Yes. Cheers.
We'll start with breaking news.
Let's get the latest on the ground.
So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better.
I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, you know, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
They're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that.
We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world.
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
Lioness, fly better. Fly Emirates, fly better.
Now, as we've been talking about this morning, wildfires have been burning over vast areas of continents from across the world, from Hawaii today, we've been talking to Greece. Well, joining me now is the author, Christy Lefteri, who's just written a book about a Greek family and community devastated in the aftermath of the wildfires there, and it's called The Book of Fire. Christy, lovely to have you in, and we talked to a family today who've lost a loved one in Hawaii. It's just awful, and it seems to be now really common over the summer to be reporting on these stories. Well, it's the time, I suppose, to talk about it, but was that what inspired this book, The Book of Fire?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so terrifying what's going on now. But in the summer of 2021, while the fires were happening in Evia, I was pregnant. I was 3 months pregnant at the time. And I wanted to go to Greece to learn as much as I could about the wildfires and speak to people and understand what they'd been going through. And I guess I write stories because, you know, sometimes the news coverage can be so overwhelming that it can desensitise us. So what I wanted to do was paint a picture through writing of what is happening now, to highlight what people are feeling and going through in these places where they're losing loved ones, being displaced by fires, losing their homes, losing so much, the beautiful forests being completely burnt. And so I went there while I was pregnant and feeling Evie growing in my tummy, I thought, well, what world is she going to grow up in? So I went there to learn as much as I could to try and understand what people are going through now.
And of course, we reported on the news and we send all the cameras there, but as soon as the fires have gone, the cameras leave, don't they? And what happens to the people then?
So I went to Muddy in 2021. The fires had happened 3 years before that. While I was there, the fires were raging in Evia. And so I was seeing the news coverage of what was happening in Evia. And at the same time, I was speaking to people who were trying to heal. And there's many ways. So they found a cafe that had survived the fire, and it became a cafe for survivors. And they built friendships there and told stories there and developed ways to survive and to find ways of keeping hope in their hearts. And I think what I learned was that, yes, we can always heal, but these traumas are absolutely so devastating for people. It just rips their lives apart.
It's a trauma that I think a lot of people feel quite helpless to do anything about as well, isn't it? And that is very hard.
Yes, absolutely, because it's such a huge thing. It's difficult. I think another thing that I learned while I was there is that it's so... when you've suffered such devastation and trauma, it's so easy to want to sort of find something tangible to put all the blame on. And the sort of bigger issue of climate change, the bigger issue of global warming becomes something so difficult to sort of allow into our hearts and into our minds. I found that when I was researching and speaking to people.
Did you mean that the people that were not linking the two, that they felt that they couldn't put one and the other together?
Yeah, I did find that. It was really difficult. So people would often say to me, well, someone started the fire. And of course, that's true and needs to be dealt with. Or the fire was mismanaged, and of course that's true and absolutely needs to be dealt with. And I don't want to undermine the seriousness of those things. But sometimes I found that it's so much easier to put all the blame on those things and forget about this massive ghost of global warming, which is all around us. And actually the thing that's making these fires as big and as ferocious in dimension, in speed as they are.
Yeah, there's the phrase climate grief, which features in the book. What is that? And maybe just explain it.
So I came across a word while I was researching. It's a very beautiful word, solastalgia, which is basically the grief we feel at the loss of our environment. And I think we don't realise how devastating that can be. So when I was in Muddy, for example, a man took me around and he explained to me what the beautiful forest looked like before, and I could see what it looked like right there and there in front of me. And it was absolutely traumatising. For me, I didn't feel the grief, obviously. I saw it in this man's eyes. It wasn't my land, it wasn't somewhere that I knew before the fire, but I could sense in him how sad and how much he was still mourning for the loss of not only his loved ones and his home, but the environment around him too.
It's important, isn't it? Because I suppose you would think if someone's house burns down, that you would mourn all of the actual things, but losing that whole landscape can be a grief in itself.
Sure, and the book is also a lot about the beauty of our world. You know, I think going there and seeing what the fires had done and looking into people's eyes and understanding what they had been through reminded me also at the same time how beautiful our world is.
That's a very uplifting thing to end on, which is a pretty depressing subject, but I'm sure not a depressing book. Christy Lefteri, lovely to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Today. Right, let's take a look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
More rain to come on Friday, but the next few days look mainly dry and warm. For now, mainly fine, if a little chilly in some rural spots, but there are some showers in the far north. Any early fog will soon lift to leave plenty of sunshine through the morning, but northern Scotland will be cloudier. It'll stay mainly dry, but there'll be a few light showers around, with almost anywhere at risk. Calm conditions mean it is going to feel quite warm in the sunshine. The afternoon will see showers becoming mainly confined to the north and the west. They will fade overnight, leaving most places dry. But northeastern Britain will see low cloud developing. There will also be some mist and fog in some places. This will soon lift tomorrow morning. The low cloud in the northeast will break. That will leave good sunny spells, but isolated showers could develop again.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Now, why the long face? You may be surprised to hear that's a question horses could be asking. A new study has found that they can differentiate between human expressions of joy and sadness. Researchers in Finland and France have observed and analysed horses' behaviour. The animals were shown human facial expressions and voices depicting joy and sadness, and were found to be more attracted by joyful facial expressions and more excited by joyful voices. So there you go. Make sure you put a smile on your face next time you're passing a field of horses. That's it for Sky News Breakfast for today. Do come back and join us. We'll be here from 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. Up next, back live to Sydney. Stay tuned.